In a world where monsters and dungeons exist, there are also warriors and guilds, and our protagonist is one of them. He is a strong and skilled warrior who easily handles dangerous challenges, and so he is known by his nickname, the Undead, since he always returns from his missions. But this has left him bored, and our hero is seeking greater and greater challenges, for he longs for the end of his journey in this life. However, his relentless search for an end keeps placing him in situations from which he always emerges victorious, and his fame only grows. Little does he know, though, the future that awaits him. In this world, there is a group called Mistflower, formed by people who fight with the sole desire to die. Their leader is called the Undead, as he is unable to die. His real name is No Yunha, a berserker whose only purpose is to kill monsters. Currently, he is facing a black dungeon. There are only 8 of them in the entire world, and this one is a dungeon no one has cleared so far. After defeating a monster, the protagonist picks up his sword again. He faces others approaching and thinks this is the place where his 32 years of life will finally end. Then he strikes the first monster. He manages to slice it easily. Right after, a serpent-like monster attacks. It ends up biting his arm. Even wounded, he manages to break free by smashing the serpent's head into the ground. After freeing himself, he defeats the enemy, but his troubles are only beginning, because an ogre appears and charges at him. The protagonist tries to strike, but the enemy blocks his sword with its teeth, leaving him vulnerable to incoming attacks. After being thrown far away, the ogre charges again like a tank. However, No Yunha still has one last trick up his sleeve. He had a dagger kept hidden. With it, he is able to defeat the monster. But to the protagonist's surprise, he is the only one in his group who survived. Even so, No Yunha doesn't falter and grabs a sword from a fallen comrade. To him, it doesn't matter if he's outnumbered. He wants to defeat the boss no matter what, even if he has to do it alone. Thus, he heads to a gate. But once inside, he notices it's very dark. Still, he is certain the boss is in there. The monster known as the Abyss Emperor opens its eyes and stares at the protagonist. With just one look, No Yunha is gravely wounded and almost dies right there. Not only that, but the monster's attack causes a massive explosion. After being struck, No Yunha is hurled away and severely injured. But then he starts laughing, believing that he will finally have his eternal rest. He thinks it's impossible for humanity of this era to defeat the Abyss Emperor. Still, dying to a powerful boss whose home is a dungeon no one has cleared doesn't seem like such a bad way to go. But suddenly, a desperate girl screams for him not to die yet. He realizes it's Liu Zhang, and is surprised she's still alive. The girl uses healing powers on him. However, the protagonist tells her she should run instead. Her will to save him is strong, so she tells No Yunha to stay quiet. But even she realizes that his wounds are severe, and it's a miracle he's still alive. Even so, she doesn't want to give up helping and thinks she can perform a miracle to protect his life. For his part, the protagonist has already given up. He sees no other end for his life. Reflecting for a moment, he concludes he has no regrets. His only concern is for his partner, as he feels he didn't treat her as well as he should have. The protagonist never had lasting bonds, but he also worries about a brat named Bake Lion, who has just become an adult in such a cruel world. Desperate, Liu Zhang says she won't let him die, even if she has to turn back time. She doesn't care about the cost. Her priority is to save Yunha, so she uses her magical powers to perform a miracle, and thus she sends him back in time. Right after, the protagonist has a strange vision. He sees his parents right in front of him, just like when he was a baby. No Yunha wonders if this is some kind of flashback. His parents then introduce themselves to little Yunha, until he reaches out to touch his mother's finger, leaving her deeply moved by the gesture. Upon touching his mother's hand, he realizes this isn't just a glimpse. He is actually in control of his actions, concluding that instead of dying, he went back in time to when he was 1 year old. The protagonist thinks that Liu Zhang must have activated a miracle, because there's no other way to achieve something like this. Besides, his party member had abilities on par with the 12 monarchs, so he's not surprised that she managed to pull it off. No Yunha is shocked, as he never imagined he would see his parents' faces again. They were both killed when he was 6 years old, and since then, he developed a deep hatred for monsters. However, he believes he's been given a second chance, and this time he wants to do things differently and change the future. Despite having his past memories, No Yunha is just a baby. He can't do anything in this body, and that frustrates him. The only good part is the feeling of freedom. Not only that, but he has a sister who is 4 years older, named No Yuna. His memories with her are more distant than with his parents, but there is one specific moment he remembers clearly. A moment when his sister gave her life to protect him from danger. On the same day, he lost his entire family to monsters. The way his sister treats him makes him realize that she loves him, maybe even a little too much. At 9 months old, the protagonist attempts to concentrate mana for the first time. Before regressing, he didn't have much mana in his body. Now he wants to cultivate as much as his body can handle. His sister shows up and interrupts him, but while she does this, he notices something. His sister has a large amount of mana in her body. He knows that having too much mana can cause pycnosis, which is harmful to one's health, so he wants to help his sister manage her mana. By the time he's 4 years old, No Yunha can already walk and talk, among other things. Now he's been spending more time outside the house than inside, thanks to his sister, who made sure he socialized with other kids. No Yuna is popular not only among the other children, but with everyone in the neighborhood. She is completely the opposite of the protagonist. A girl approaches the protagonist and asks what he's doing there. No Yunha replies that he was dragged here, calling the girl Stick Minji. She doesn't like the teasing at all and insists her name is Kim Minji. The protagonist completely ignores her and goes to the other children. He thinks this is very annoying, as he's a 32-year-old adult and shouldn't be hanging out with 4-year-olds. Unlike him, his sister is extremely excited, and for No Yunha, it's gratifying to see her smile like that. As the evening comes, they return home. No Yunha decided to give in to his sister's wish and ended up getting dirty playing with the other boys. However, No Yuna says it was fun. Then, out of nowhere, a dog appears and stares at them. No Yuna immediately senses the danger. She steps in front of her brother. She tries to calm him down, saying she'll protect him from danger. After all, she's the older one. Immediately, the protagonist remembers his past life, but he doesn't want things to end the same way. So he takes the role of the protective brother and offers to take the lead. The protagonist thinks that back then, he couldn't do anything to protect his family because he was just a helpless child. But things are different now, because he claims that in this life, he will be the one to protect others. With that, he uses his powers and evokes his mana. The stray dog feels intimidated by his presence, and it works, because the animal runs away. After that, his sister is surprised by his actions. The protagonist tells her not to worry because he's strong and can take care of himself. No Yuna gets excited and asks if that was mana, saying she wants to do it too and begs him to teach her. The protagonist finds her reaction strange, since he expected people to be scared in moments like this, not thrilled. He agrees to teach her anyway, as he was going to do it eventually. After all, his goal is to protect his sister's smile until the very end. The incident that took his family always haunted him. That's why he wants to change his future, to make sure it doesn't happen again. Back at home, No Yunha teaches his sister how to control mana using a toy spinning top. The girl is a bit clumsy at first, so he explains that she needs to apply the same amount of force in the same direction to maintain balance. However, he realizes that although No Yuna is blessed with power, she has no talent for controlling it. Frustrated, the girl tries once more to control her mana, saying that this time she'll manage to spin the top properly. However, when she tries to control the pawn, she ends up doing worse than before, throwing the piece far away. Her brother realizes she still has a long way to go. At another moment, an actress wins a Best Performance award, and the whole family is watching TV. Meanwhile, the protagonist's mother says he's turning 6 years old, and it's time for him to attend kindergarten. No Yunha claims he doesn't need to go to school. He delayed it as much as he could, but remembers he promised to go when he turned 6. Just thinking about being in the same space as other loud and whiny kids already irritates him. On the TV, it's announced that there's only 1 minute left until the new year, and as everyone knows, this will be the day that marks a turning point in humanity's history. A reporter says they're broadcasting in front of the Jongmyo Shrine, where the ancestors are buried, and a new chapter begins for Korea. No Yunha reflects that after humanity learned to use mana, people became obsessed with using it constantly, which ended up attracting monsters, and a great incident occurred. At the turn of the century, chaos took over Korea, and the country lost 30% of its population. Fear spread not only among them, but throughout humanity, for they witnessed something never seen before. The old powers and governments lost strength, and a new hierarchy emerged in the world, with the rich at the very top as the true authorities. Along with this, players appeared, those who possessed high amounts of mana and power to fight monsters. The situation stabilized with the new authorities, but much damage had already been done, and cities lost connection with one another. Yet amid all this chaos, a small flame was lit. The actress who was awarded for her work also received a gift from the gods. Named Lim Ga-yul, she used to be a famous actress, but ended up becoming the goddess of the first generation who protected South Korea. She was given that title because she had the ability to prevent mana from going rampant, and the power to disperse it, a power called the Gift of White Grace. From that, an order of players was created to protect the goddess's altar, known as the 12 Monarchs. They were overseen by the Mana Management Department, but the protagonist knows most players would go on to form their own clans. As the most important person in Korea, Lim Ga-yul was chosen as the strongest among the 12 Monarchs. The other players of the 12 Monarchs also belonged to their own private clans, and they used both the authority of the department and the power of their clans to take control of the player industry. Currently, the goddess gathered the 12 and said she was looking forward to their performance. She used her powers to call upon a force to help them protect their country. Through this, she managed to manipulate the altar and spread her energy across all of Korea. All of this was broadcast live as the mana invocation was so powerful that it could be seen from afar. No Yuna got off the couch because she wanted to see it from the balcony. She was amazed by the lights in the sky. In fact, the protagonist's family also went to the balcony to see it up close. His father prayed and said they could now live their lives in peace. The protagonist's mother did the same. Not just his family, but other people also began praying for peace in their lives. No Yuna made her prayers and told her brother to pray too, but the protagonist thought it was useless, since he believed God doesn't exist in this world. He thinks that when the world ended before it was reset, the gods disappeared too. Instead, No Yunha looked up at the sky, realizing that once again the sky was turning dark. Then he saw his sister praying for the safety of their family, and he thought that in this life he too wants to live in peace with his family. But he knows that the accident that once took his family is about to happen again. When he finally turned 6 years old, No Yunha entered kindergarten. His teacher, Tayo, encouraged him to introduce himself to his classmates, so he did, giving a brief introduction. His classmates showed excitement about having him in their class. However, the teacher kept insisting that the boy should show more enthusiasm, until something unexpected happened. Kim Minji saw the protagonist and asked what he was doing in her class. He was surprised to see Toothpick Minji. But again, the girl got furious for being called that in front of her school friends. The teacher told them not to fight and encouraged them to become friends during free time. Next, the protagonist is surrounded by the other children. They quickly start asking him lots of questions, making the teacher think he won't have trouble getting along with the others. However, No Yunha gets quite irritated, claiming that he hates kids. He tries to get away from them and heads toward the books to pass the time. After picking up a book, he laments that they're all childish. Even so, he sits next to a girl who doesn't know him yet. But it doesn't take long for the silence to be broken, because some boys show up to bother the girl and ask what's so fun about reading. Choi Eun-hyuk, their leader, calls her Jong Hae-yang and says she has no friends because she's always alone. Noticing that she's wearing a ribbon, Eun-hyuk grabs it and rips it from her hair. Jong Hae-yang pleads to have her ribbon back, claiming it was a gift from her father. But the boys start running off, saying she can try to get it back if she catches them. The girl starts crying, begging to have her item returned, until suddenly, the protagonist calls their attention, saying that this is really childish. The other boys are startled by his comment. Eun-hyuk asks what the protagonist just said. No Yunha stands up, irritated for being disturbed, and says straight to the bully's face that he's acting like a little kid. Angry, the boy tries to punch the protagonist, but he doesn't know who he's dealing with, and his ignorance leads to his downfall. The protagonist picks up the ribbon and returns it to Jong Hae-yang, and tells her not to let them take her ribbon again. The bully mutters on the ground, but the protagonist walks away, thinking he doesn't want to hear nonsense from a 6-year-old. However, he glares at the troublemakers with a frightening look, and Eun-hyuk quickly gets up and runs away, shouting that next time he'll get his revenge. A little shy, Jong Hae-yang tugs on the protagonist's shirt and thanks him for getting her ribbon back. Earlier, the protagonist had analyzed the mana levels of the bully and of Minji, noticing that theirs were above the others. So now he decides to analyze the girl he just met. But he's shocked by how much mana she has, even more than his own sister. The protagonist thinks that a child like her could become one of the 12 monarchs in the future, since he sees great potential in her. However, he never heard her name before regressing, which is strange for someone with such enormous talent. So he thinks he needs to keep this girl close, and asks to be her friend. No Yunha thinks that in this world, mana is power, and considering the girl's potential, it would be advantageous to have her by his side. For her part, Jong Hae-yang agrees, even without knowing the protagonist's true intentions, and is happy to have a real friend. Back at home, the protagonist's mother takes a paper carnation from his backpack that he made at school. She thought it was a gift for her. His sister also gave a handmade carnation to their mother, but the protagonist notices that, unlike him, his sister is quite bad at it. Still, No Yuna offers him a carnation as well. Their mother notices there were 3 carnations in the protagonist's backpack and asks who the third one is for. The protagonist says it's for his grandmother. Before regressing, whenever Parents' Day was near, they made paper carnations at school. No Yunho was forced to make them even knowing that his parents had passed away. His grandmother would take the carnations from his backpack and put them in the shoe cabinet. But she never received a carnation for herself, so No Yunha feels guilty, because he never showed his gratitude for her raising him. But now he wants to do things differently. On the day the protagonist lost his family, the goddess government opened the restricted roads so people could reunite with distant relatives. To protect the people from monsters, they hired a large number of players. However, a giant kraken appeared without warning, and many perished. He and his family were on the road, so they became victims too. Back in the present, the protagonist's father appears saying that the holiday is the next day, and asks what the kids think about visiting their grandmother. Immediately, No Yunha thinks the trip cannot happen and that he'll have to stop it no matter what. The protagonist's father was a lonely orphan, and the only grandmother he has is from his mother's side. She was the one who raised little No Yunha when he lost his family. His father says the government has ensured the roads are safe, and they can finally go visit grandma. However, the protagonist asks if they could wait a little longer before making the trip. His mother says this is the perfect opportunity for the trip, and he even made a carnation for grandma. No Yunha says he's also excited to see her, just not on this particular day. He knows that in his parents' eyes, he's just a child, so he needs to act like one to avoid suspicion. So he says that since Children's Day is coming up, he wants to enjoy it to the fullest by staying close to home. His sister agrees and says she also wants to take the chance to go to the amusement park. Their parents say they've been avoiding going out with the kids for a while because of the monsters. Then their father realizes there's no other way and says he'll have to take everyone to the amusement park. Their mother says she'll prepare something for them to eat. With that, the protagonist is happy that his plan is working, because even if he can't prevent the Kraken's appearance, at least he can stop the trip from happening. But to his surprise, his mother receives a phone call. It's about her own mother, and the news catches her off guard. She says it was from the hospital. They said grandma fainted. No Yunha can't believe it, since his grandmother's health was never fragile in his past life. His mother becomes worried and wants to go see grandma right away. The father offers to go with her, even though she insists he should stay with the kids. Instead, he tells the children they can't go to the amusement park at a time like this and says they can go another day. But now they have to visit grandma. The protagonist's mother also comforts him, knowing he wanted to go to the park instead of traveling, but explains they can go another day. Meanwhile, No Yunha thinks that by trying to change the future, his grandmother ended up getting hurt, and he wonders what else might happen if he changes more things. Because if that's the case, his family's fate may end up being the same as before. However, unlike before, he's stronger now and has a lot of combat experience. So if he can't stop his family from encountering the Kraken, he'll have to protect them from danger. Then he agrees to make the trip, and with no other option, he has to prepare to face the Kraken. Monsters have their own power ranking, and the protagonist knows the Kraken isn't one of the strongest. However, at this point in time, players aren't as powerful as those in the future. He knows he can't defeat the monster in his current state, so all he can do is buy time until the 12 monarchs show up to help. The only weapons he has at his disposal are school supplies, but if he charges the items with mana, they might deal some damage. His sister comes over and asks if he's ready, because they're about to leave. Confidently, No Yunha answers that he is. Already on the road, No Yunha falls asleep on her brother's shoulder. The protagonist's mother says he should sleep too, because the trip will be long. But No Yunha insists on staying awake. He knows the action could begin at any moment and needs to stay alert the entire time. Knowing the future, he realizes that something should have already happened and wonders if anything changed due to his actions. Suddenly, an explosion occurs on the bridge. The family's car is hit, and the parents are shocked. No Yuna wakes up with all the commotion, and the protagonist realizes that the monster has finally appeared, as if fate were mocking his wish to change things. Now he knows he'll have to face the dreaded Kraken. Chaos doesn't take long to begin. As people run from the danger, players show up to fight the monster, but they're not prepared for such a challenge, and many are defeated before they can even do anything. In the protagonist's family car, his father says they should get out too. They can't stay still. He says if they remain calm, they'll get out safely. The children are a little nervous, but their mother tells them to listen to their father and get out of the car because the players will protect them. Even worried, everyone gets out of the car. But No Yuna ends up hurting her leg, and she can't stand up to walk. Her father says he'll carry her and asks No Yunha if he can walk. He replies that he can. After that, one of the players tries to guide the family to a safe area on the bridge. The protagonist notices that despite the monster having appeared and the players panicking, the veterans quickly assess the situation and are helping with the evacuation. However, No Yunha knows that the Kraken isn't the only problem, and he needs to get off the bridge before the worst happens. Right after that, the player who was guiding the family is struck by a spear, and No Yunha realizes it's too late, because the rest of the enemies have already arrived. He sees the monsters known as divers approaching. The divers not only attack people who are fleeing, but also go after the players who are helping with the evacuation. One of the veteran players asks if anyone can use healing magic. A woman among the group says she can, but before she can reach the wounded, she's struck down, and the player who called for help becomes the next target. In the middle of all this, the family tries to flee. The children's father says that no matter what happens, they need to trust him, so he tells them to run as far away from the chaos as they can. However, the Kraken starts gathering debris and hurls it in multiple directions. No Yunha sees this and warns his father to be careful. Then several people are hit and a few explosions occur, making the situation even worse. Seeing that the escape route is blocked, the children's father begins to panic. Not only are they trapped, but the players are as well. They say they have to wait for reinforcements, because without them, they can't do anything. No Yunha remembers that before he regressed, The 12 monarchs arrived at the scene 30 minutes after the Kraken appeared. He sees the players handling the divers, but knows that won't last long. But this was exactly what No Yunha had been preparing for. So he knows this is the time to protect his family. He tells his parents not to leave that spot until reinforcements arrive. His mother asks what he's doing. No Yunha tells his family again not to move until help gets there. He also says that the players will hold back the monsters, but it won't be enough. So he says that if the worst happens, he will protect them himself. Before leaving, he says that the only person besides him who knows how to use mana is his sister. So he leaves his parents in her care and heads toward the battle with the Kraken. The protagonist uses his abilities to move faster, but he feels his body resisting because this is the first time he's doing this in this life, and his child's body is not like before. But he thinks that if he doesn't do it, he might not make it in time. So No Yunha charges toward the Kraken. Some people see a child running toward the monster, and they don't understand why he's doing that. On the way, a few divers appear. No Yunha uses mana coating before engaging them. He covers his small blade with mana and strikes, turning it into a usable weapon against the monsters. He's able to slash with more precision. Even so, the enemies keep attacking. The protagonist then dodges the enemies and strikes them when they least expect it. The divers try to catch him off guard, but unfortunately for them, No Yunha is faster. Soon, the enemies realize they need to increase the intensity of their attacks. As a result, the protagonist is hit and thrown against one of the cars. Right away, he notices the enemies are angrier, but as he attacks, he remembers his past. He feels his senses returning, and little by little, it's as if he's back in his previous life, as if he were once again the undead he used to be. In his next attack, he intensifies the strength of his blows, but upon landing, a diver tries to surprise him. Wisely, No Yunha dodges and defeats the enemy, then immediately heads toward the others that are approaching. In the midst of the battle, his blade breaks, and he realizes that even with mana coating, it didn't last long. But No Yunha still has a pair of scissors. He splits them in two and wields them like daggers. After that, he hurries because he still has his main objective, until finally, he reaches the fearsome Kraken. With no other options, he'll have to face the monster with only what he has in hand. The Kraken doesn't stay still and attacks, causing massive damage to the bridge. No Yunha is forced to retreat, but he tries to get close to the enemy and leaps from above, heading straight for its head. As he gets close, he jumps and manages to injure the monster. Not only that, but No Yunha is able to cut it slightly, causing a significant wound. However, in the middle of a distraction, the Kraken retaliates, knocking the protagonist away. No Yunha regains his balance, but realizes that one of his blades is already broken, and now the only thing he has to face a colossal monster is half a pair of scissors and his willpower. After catching his breath, the protagonist returns to fighting the enemy. While dodging all the tentacle attacks, he also strikes whenever there's an opening. But once again, No Yunha gets distracted, allowing himself to be pushed away by the Kraken once more. In the midst of this, the protagonist realizes he's almost out of mana, but he barely has time to think as the Kraken attacks the bridge's pillars, forcing the protagonist to retreat away from the danger. Not only that, but the Kraken also starts throwing objects. When he sees a truck coming his way, No Yunha ironically wishes the enemy would take it easy. Then, No Yunha summons a large amount of mana to create an energy sword, slicing the truck in half with it. That way, he isn't hit by the projectile, but this completely drains his mana, and now he only has half of a pair of scissors to use as a weapon. As if that wasn't bad enough, he falls to the ground, unable to move his body after exhausting all his mana. Still, he knows he can't give up, or all his efforts so far will be wasted. The protagonist gathers his last strength and tries to stand up, thinking things can't end like this. After all, he wants to live a little longer alongside his family. His enemy shows no mercy and attacks. Seeing that the end is near, No Yunha thinks that only a miracle can save him. Just then, he's surprised by his sister, who appears in an attempt to protect him. She casts a force field around them, which acts as a shield against the Kraken's attack. The energy she emits also affects the diving beasts around them, burning them as if they were nothing, and the light can be seen from afar. Still in shock, No Yunha thinks this might be the miracle he wished for. Before his regression, he only knew of 4 people who possessed the miracle, and the only one he trusted was named Li Yujung. After seeing the mana inside his sister, the protagonist wondered if she might be one of those with the miracle. He just didn't expect such power to awaken so soon. He also notices that beyond the barrier, his injuries are being healed. Not only that, but the light is keeping the Kraken at bay. However, he knows there's a cost to using the miracle. Those who use it end up paying a price. So he asks his sister if she's okay. She replies that she's fine, but feels a little tired. After that, No Yunha faints. The protagonist sees that she has only a small amount of mana left, just enough to keep her heart beating. So he lays his sister down and tells her to rest. Meanwhile, he will take care of the rest. No Yunha says the enemy is smarter now, likely because it senses the danger his sister poses. The Kraken tries to strike them both, but No Yunha stops it, declaring that it won't be able to do anything, and he won't let the Kraken even touch her. The protagonist uses his powers to attack the Kraken and deals heavy damage to the monster. He managed to recover some mana, but it's still not enough to defeat the enemy. However, he thinks the good news is that the future has changed and his family is safe. That means there's nothing more to fear. All he has to do now is wait for the 12 monarchs to arrive. Speaking of rescue, one of the 12 is stuck in traffic and is frustrated that the car isn't moving. He complains, but the driver says the roads are full and there's no way around it. The player says he should quit the 12 monarchs because on holiday he'd rather be relaxing than stuck in traffic. He also says he only took this job because he wanted to fight alongside the strongest, not to protect civilians. Then suddenly, he and the driver notice something different. Both of them feel a powerful mana presence. Right after, the player receives a call, and the person on the other end felt the mana too. Park Hiram says that according to the information, the monster must be a level 3 Kramer. Excited, the player asks where the enemy is. The fact that he seems happy to hear about the monster scares his driver. Over the phone, Park Hiram says that the players already at the bridge can't handle the situation alone. To the player, that's enough. He hangs up and gets out of the car. The driver calls him Lord of the Clan and asks what he's doing. He replies that he's going to walk to the site, because with traffic like this, he'll never get there by car. After that, he grabs a sword that had been stored away. His driver says it would take hours to get there on foot, but the clan lord says 30 minutes is enough for him. He then activates his strength powers and takes off at full speed toward the monster. Impressed and frightened, the driver says this was expected of the clan lord, as he's obsessed with fighting stronger opponents. The clan lord is also known as the Flame Demon. His real name is Kang Hanchil. 30 minutes later, he arrives at the bridge. Some divers try to attack him, but Kang incinerates them as if they were nothing. Then he's surprised to see a powerful energy being emitted from a distance, and thinks that no one involved in the incident should be capable of using such magic. That means there's someone new in the area. Back to the protagonist, he's still trying to delay the Kraken. He uses what little mana he has left to protect his sister, until Kang Hanchil arrives, already striking the monster. No Yunha feels relieved because reinforcements have finally arrived. He immediately recognizes the Flame Demon, one of the 12 monarchs. With just one blow, Kang burned a large part of the Kraken. Wounded, the monster chose to dive back into the ocean to extinguish the flames. The protagonist knows Kang's gift is pyrokinesis, the ability to freely control fire. Kang Hanchil then looks at the children and realizes they're just kids, but he examines their mana flow and sees they're very powerful. He quickly deduces that the girl passed out from using all her mana and the boy protected her from the Kraken. Noticing the children's potential, Kang Hanchil thinks he'd like to see how strong they'll become when they grow up. So he reassures them and says he's not an enemy. He also says the only reason he's there is to defeat the Kraken, then tells the boy to step back, because the monster will resurface again soon. Before regressing, the protagonist had once encountered Kang Hanchil. The Flame Demon said the undead had a great reputation, and wanted to see for himself if the rumors about his strength were true. But on that occasion, No Yunha showed no interest in a duel. Still, Kang Hanchil insisted that he wouldn't leave without fighting the undead. The protagonist then agreed to fight and said his opponent wouldn't have the right to regret it afterward. Back to the present, the protagonist recalls how, in his past life, he was always challenged by Kang Hanchil. No Yunha was never able to defeat him in a duel, as his opponent grew stronger with each fight, because he truly was someone born to fight. Meanwhile, the Flame Demon taunts the monster, but that causes the Kraken to destroy another bridge pillar. Kang thinks he won't be able to fight and protect the kids at the same time. Luckily for them, help arrives, raising new pillars to support the bridge. The Flame Demon says the timing was perfect, because Park Hyerin, the Holy Mother, arrived by helicopter. She is one of the 12 monarchs, and says not to call her that since she's not that old. She also says reinforcements will arrive soon and the rescue will begin shortly. Park Hyerin blesses Kang with a buff and tells him to focus on fighting the Kraken. He agrees and says he'll let her handle the children. Shortly after, the Kraken emerges again. The Flame Demon wastes no time and launches his attack. He dives into the water engulfed in flames, but the fire isn't extinguished. Kang rises from the water still burning and faces the Kraken. The enemy doesn't hold back and strikes. Kang responds by unleashing his fire on the monster, calling it weak. He causes a massive fire explosion, spreading flames all around the Kraken and completely burning it. Seeing it happen up close, the protagonist celebrates, believing the enemy has finally been defeated. Meanwhile, Park Hyerin descends from the helicopter and walks over to them. She tries to use her magic to heal them, but after examining the children, she realizes they're not injured. She quickly concludes that the magic she saw earlier was probably a miracle that healed the children. Park Hyerin finds this amazing, as she never expected to witness something like that. She tries to approach the kids, but the protagonist warns her not to touch his sister. Park Hyerin immediately steps back, as she senses the protective intent coming from the boy, despite him being just a child. Soon after, the rescue team arrives. She still has a few doubts, but tells them to head to a hospital first. To talk about it later, the media reports that after the appearance of the Kraken, massive destruction occurred on the Songsan Bridge, and many people perished. But the monster was defeated, and the goddess's government has already been conducting rescue operations for some time. From the hospital, the protagonist watches the news on TV. However, the reason he's there is to accompany his sister. He knows she's suffering from mana exhaustion, since she used a lot of it, and that she'll recover after taking a mana potion. Even so, No Yunha feels happy, because in the end, everything turned out fine and he prevented harm from coming to his family. And he really did manage to change the future. Then he reunites with his parents at the hospital, but he remembers that he'll have to explain what happened on the bridge, and he's probably in trouble. Worried, his mother asks if he got hurt. No Yunha says that he and his sister are fine, but her mana is drained and a potion is being prepared. Annoyed, his father asks why he disobeyed and ran toward danger. The protagonist simply apologizes for being reckless, but in his mind he thinks he shouldn't be apologizing since everything he did was for the good of his family, and thanks to that, they're alive. He doesn't feel the slightest regret. After all, everyone survived. However, he realizes that his parents aren't thinking about the outcome because they don't know what he knows. To them, their son disobeyed and put himself in danger. With that in mind, he apologizes to his parents once again. Crying, he claims that he was wrong and won't do it again. His parents hug him, unable to stay upset with him. With that, No Yunha thinks he no longer needs to face monsters, because now he can truly live like a normal child. The next morning, his parents say they need to take care of some paperwork and tell No Yunha to stay there with his sister. He promises he won't leave her side. The protagonist thinks his parents' trust was shaken during the incident, so he needs to behave if he wants things to return to how they were. In the midst of that, he feels hungry and eats a sweet. But he regrets that it's already gone and imagines that due to all his effort, his body needs more energy. That's why he's so hungry. Then, out of nowhere, someone shows up and offers him a sweet. That person is none other than Kang Hanchil, and the protagonist is surprised to see him. Kang notices the boy's shocked expression and assumes he must not like chocolate cookies. Even so, he puts the treat into the protagonist's mouth. No Yunha wonders what the flame demon is doing there. Kang, meanwhile, strikes up a conversation and asks how old the protagonist is. The boy introduces himself formally and answers that he is 6 years old. He also says his sister is 10. After that, Kang Hanchiol invites him to join the academy, saying he can offer a recommendation if the boy is interested. The protagonist immediately assumes Kang wants to place him in an academy just to fight him when he's grown up. In any case, Kang says the boy is still very young and will give him some time to think about the offer. Before leaving, Kang says he'll remember No Yuna. At the door, Park Hyerin was waiting. She says that was definitely a miracle, one that had never appeared in Korea before, and asks if Kang is really going to leave just like that. Kang says he doesn't care about miracles, he cares about their strength. He also says that if the miracle is as rare as she describes, soon that child will be overwhelmed by the world's attention and will never have a normal life again. So he says no one wants that. Therefore, he suggests they just leave it be. He also says that if Park Hyerin agrees, he'll pay for dessert or something like that. The next day, the family finally manages to travel to Grandma's house. She comes to greet them at the door, but the adults tell her she should be resting since she's still sick. However, she says she missed them a lot and wanted to welcome them, especially the children. But she notices that the trip was tiring since the kids were sleeping in the car. Sometime later, the protagonist finally wakes up and realizes his sister is sleeping on top of him. No Yunha thinks his sister has terrible sleeping habits, but looking at his mother, he immediately sees who the girl takes after. After that, he decides to go outside for some fresh air, and when he checks his mana, he notices it has increased. He remembers that before going back in time, he had the Berserk gift, a gift that, the more mana it consumed, but his physical abilities and magical properties would increase. However, the downside was his mental state. He would lose reason and become uncontrollable. But on the bridge, that didn't happen, and No Yunha realizes that without the penalty, this gift becomes even more useful. He doesn't know the true nature of this power, but he wants to find out as soon as possible. Suddenly, his grandmother appears and asks what he's doing awake out there. No Yunha didn't even notice the old lady approaching and simply says he overslept. He thinks that his grandmother is always by his side whenever he gets lost in his own thought. He also notices that she's in the mood to chat, no matter the topic. He tries to bring up a subject, but remembers that from her point of view, he's just a child. Until his grandmother asks if he wants some more milk. Before No Yunha can answer, his mother shows up with the milk, and he wonders how she got there so fast. After that, they pause to talk. His mother says she got worried over the phone, but Grandma insists she's fine and says there's no need for such drama. The protagonist thinks his grandmother tripped, but came out with just a scratch, and they don't understand why. She claims she fell because she was distracted, as if she were in some kind of daze. While going up the stairs, she saw someone warning her not to go there. Thinking back, Grandma says the person wasn't talking to her, But to No Yunha and his family, the protagonist thinks calling that a dream would be odd. If things had gone wrong, his whole family would have paid the price. So his grandmother should have warned them. Either way, the old lady says she dreamed of a deer outside her house, but when she got there, it was just little No Yunha. The protagonist's mother says she had a similar dream, where her father left a deer behind. She changes the subject and asks what No Yunha wants to be when he grows up. He thinks about what to say, but ends up having a very strange vision. His mother notices the discomfort and asks what's wrong. No Yunha says it's nothing. He just doesn't know what he wants yet. His grandmother says he's still young and there's plenty of time to think about it. So he should study and enjoy life and one day decide what he wants to become. And if he still doesn't know, he can keep living until he finds out. The protagonist understands that his grandmother is telling him to enjoy life to the fullest. His mother says grandma is right and believes her son will be able to accomplish anything he sets his mind to. She says that the name No Yunha means universe and carries endless potential, and that he will always have his family nearby who will support him no matter what. Right then, his sister appears and says she wants to join them. Grandma offers her some warm milk as well. No Yunha feels happy in that moment, until he remembers something, so he gives the gift he prepared for his grandmother, which makes the old lady very emotional, and she says she wants to put it somewhere everyone can see, to make her neighbors jealous. In turn, the protagonist is also happy, because he wants to make happy memories with his family in this life, as a way to thank his grandmother for everything she did in his past life. Back at home, the protagonist's parents reveal that the children are going to have a baby brother. This news catches both of them by surprise. His sister is super excited with the announcement, but No Yunha has an unusual reaction. He becomes extremely happy and thanks his mother for it, saying that this is the best thing that's happened since he was born. His father is surprised by the boy's reaction, saying that No Yunha got more emotional than he did. Some time passes and No Yunha returns to school. He's now 7 years old and playing with some girls, pretending to be a little puppy, but he still feels embarrassed doing such a thing. To make it worse, Min Jin says he's not even a cute puppy, and teases him, calling him a stray dog. The protagonist can't do anything about it, since Min Jin threatens to report his bad behavior. He always sleeps during class whenever he gets the chance. As punishment, he had to go through this, and if he gets knocked down, it could make things worse. At a moment when the girls get distracted, Min Jin threatens to snitch again, but the protagonist uses the chance to escape from them. That's when he runs into Jong Haeyang. The girl says she's reading Sherlock Holmes and is totally obsessed. The protagonist knows the story and says that Sherlock and Professor Moriarty fall into a waterfall at the end and die. Jong Haeyang gets upset about the spoiler, even though the protagonist claims it was unintentional. He tries to fix the situation, but ends up making things worse, so he decides to just walk away. When he returns to the group, he notices that some boys are dueling with toy swords. One of them is the same cocky boy from before, who, upon seeing the protagonist, says the timing couldn't be more perfect, because he started the duel to prove he was the strongest in the class, and now he wants to challenge No Yunha too. He draws his sword, claiming the space is too small for the both of them, then insists that No Yunha pick up a sword because he wants to end their rivalry. The protagonist notices that Eun Hyung has his friends cheering for him. Not only that, but the whole crowd is on his opponent's side, since No Yunha's popularity with the girls has caused jealousy. He sees Minji and thinks that at least she would root for him, since they're neighbors. However, the girl is also cheering for his defeat because she hates him. No Yunha feels a bit down, realizing no one is cheering for him. In the crowd is Jong Haeyang, his only friend, but since he upset her earlier, she too is rooting for him to lose. With that, the protagonist feels more than ever that he's alone in life, and that only motivates him more to win, so he accepts the duel. His opponent charges, expecting to win right at the start. What he doesn't know is that he's actually facing a grown warrior in the body of a child. No Yunha not only disarms him, but also wins the match in a matter of seconds, once again humiliating the cocky boy, this time in front of everyone. Lying on the ground, the boy tries to get up, saying he can still fight. But shortly after, Eun Hyung collapses again. With the victory, the admiration of the whole class turns toward the protagonist, and he finally gets a bit of attention. But the kids' excitement goes even further, as they claim that with this victory, No Yunha might be able to lift Excalibur. No Yunha feels a bit awkward when faced with the toy sword. Still, he decides to go along with the game, and pulls the sword out of the toy stone, being declared the worthy one of Excalibur. Far from there, on a dropped phone, the news reports that rank 7 goblins have appeared. The Maronnier Order of Knights is on the front line of the battle, but it's been reported that 2 of the goblins on site have escaped. And according to Song Buk-gu's department, it's very likely the goblins are hiding among populated areas, and people should be careful. Back at school, the children continue playing. Minji and the others are full of energy. Unlike the rest, the protagonist feels very tired. Since the future has changed, he takes the opportunity to conserve mana whenever he can, because the world might keep changing and he wants to be ready for whatever comes. Since the bridge incident, he's been preparing for something bigger, and even avoids childish activities whenever possible. Then their teacher appears with ice cream, and everyone runs toward her, making the protagonist think that kids will always be kids. No Yunha also decides to get an ice cream, but he ends up choosing the same one as Min Jin. Neither of them wants to give up the ice cream, and a fight breaks out between them to see who gets it. Trying to stop the argument, the teacher splits the ice cream in half, getting one half to each. However, they decide to play rock, paper, scissors to see who gets the other's half. Annoyed, the teacher insists they stop and just share the ice cream. In the middle of all this, Jeon Haeng asks about the cocky boy. Min Jin says he's probably playing alone somewhere. Jeon Haeng says she wants to bring him an ice cream because she feels bad knowing someone is left out while everyone else is eating together. Min Jin says the girl's only flaw is being too kind. She offers to go with Jeon Haeng, but the girl insists it's not necessary. Then the children go back to playing. Min Jin tells the protagonist he should go too, because if he keeps isolating himself, the kids won't want to play with him, even if he tries. Min Jin insists, saying she promised her sister that she'd play with him. So even unwillingly, No Yunha is dragged to play with the other kids. He ends up joining in a game of freeze tag, and ends up being the one who has to chase the others. So he takes the opportunity to run after Min Jin, since she's the one who dragged him into this mess. The protagonist quickly catches up to her and leads her frozen. After that, he goes after the other classmates. However, he only grabs one and starts running back to Min Jin. He rushes past the girl and unfreezes her on the spot. The girl realizes the protagonist's evil plan, but before she can react, she's caught, becoming it in the game. Furious, she says she's going to make the protagonist pay. But in the middle of it all, something catches her attention. Min Jin asks why he stopped running. No Yunha senses a strange presence and notices imminent danger. Right after, he sees a monster's hand approaching. Realizing it's an armed goblin, the creature invades the kindergarten, putting the children in danger and trying to attack them with its axe. The goblin approaches a child and tries to strike, but the protagonist uses his powers to stop it, pulling the axe from its hands. The enemy's attention turns to him, which makes the goblin try to attack No Yuna. He dodges and says the monster is really annoying. Then the protagonist says he'll finish this quickly, so he can help the other children. In the middle of the chaos, the teacher also fights against the goblins. She tells No Yunha to stay still. Then the teacher throws a broom, hitting one of the goblins directly. After that, she grabs the kids and runs. One of the monsters tries to jump at her, but No Yunha uses his powers again and fires a blast of energy, pushing the goblin away from him and the teacher. Sometime later, she manages to enter the school with the children and collapses to the ground from exhaustion. She's not the only adult there. The principal is also present and says that all the other children are being evacuated. The news that goblins are attacking spreads, and fear overtakes even the adults, until, in the middle of it all, Min Jin says she doesn't see Haeyang or Eun Hyunk among the children, because they went out to get ice cream and haven't returned. The teacher says she'll go after them, but the principal warns that she needs to stay with her students, so she's left not knowing what to do. However, the protagonist decides to act and slips out without anyone noticing. Outside, the kids are already being attacked by the goblins. Eun Hyunk, the arrogant boy, is in the hands of the enemy, but Jeon Haeyang ends up using her mana to defend him and throws the goblin far away, protecting her classmate from danger. But that didn't defeat the monster, it only made it angrier. Seeing the goblin get back up, they try to run too, and quickly start running as fast as they can. In Hyunk says the adults will show up to help, and they just need to stay hidden until then. He says they can both hide on top of a playground structure. The girl climbs to the top first, but before Yeon Hyunk can go too, the monster approaches him. Knowing he won't make it to the top in time, In Hyunk says he's going to fight the creature until the adults arrive. The girl insists he shouldn't do it, but the boy is determined to fight, inspired by the flame demon, whom he usually sees on TV. In Hyunk thinks being a hero is really cool, and he wants to become someone like that. So inspired by his favorite hero, he faces the goblin, even though he's terrified. As the goblin attacks the boy, In Hyunk thinks he just needs to do what he practiced in training. But as soon as he swings at the enemy, his toy sword slips from his hand, leaving him defenseless, becoming easy prey for the enemy. But just when he thinks it's the end for him, a light appears at the end of the tunnel. Though it's the one help he didn't expect, the protagonist shows up just in time to save the children. He even praises In Hyunk, saying he was brave for protecting the girl. In the middle of their conversation, the protagonist is attacked by the goblin. In Hyunk yells, trying to warn him, but No Yunha was already aware and managed to counterattack with the toy sword. Not only that, but he also cut off one of the monster's arms with ease, since he had infused the toy with mana. The monster got distracted by that first blow, which made it vulnerable, and the protagonist sliced it in half. After that, a precious gem falls from the defeated goblin, and No Yunha is surprised since he hasn't seen one of those in a long time. Even so, he tells the boy to relax because the danger is over now. Eun Hyuk, in turn, hugs him, saying the protagonist is a true hero. Right after that, Jeon Hae-yang appears and does the same, saying that she was very scared by everything that happened. No Yunha didn't expect that reaction from them and doesn't know how to deal with kids. A little while earlier, right after No Yunha left, he used his skills to analyze the area. With that, he could see that Jeon Hae-yang had plenty of mana, and that she and the cocky boy weren't in real danger. Before going to them, the protagonist needed to deal with something bigger, because a stronger goblin was approaching the gym. He then went to the monster, confronting it to stop it from getting close to the other children. Immediately, the enemy launched an attack. Even while fighting with only a box cutter, the protagonist also relied on his mana, so he charged the school supply just like he did on the bridge. He managed to leap over the monster and strike the upper part of its neck. Even though the enemy tried to defend itself, No Yunha knew its weak spot, so after creating an opening, he slashed the monster from top to bottom, and that was enough to defeat the enemy. However, the box cutter didn't last long, so he went after the kids unarmed but confident he could help. Back to the present moment, he tries to push the two crybabies off him. Then the teacher appears and is relieved to see everyone safe. After the chaos settled, the parents came to the school to pick up their children. The protagonist ended up being questioned by a player. No Yunho was forced to explain himself, and he justified it by saying that the defeated goblin was already injured, and he only finished the job. However, the player argues that even at a low level, goblins aren't weak enough to be taken down by a 7-year-old child, and toy weapons don't cause the same damage as real ones unless they're charged with a large amount of mana. The player also asks what happened to the goblin in the hallway. No Yunha says maybe one goblin defeated the other, and the one left injured ended up being defeated by him. Still a bit confused, the player decides to accept that answer as truth. After that, the person in charge of Sonbaku's military apologizes for not having dealt with the monsters before they reached the school, but he promises to strengthen security so that it won't happen again in the future. He also congratulates No Yunha for his actions, and even presents him with a certificate for being a brave child. Even though his classmates and teachers were happy about it, the protagonist imagines that his parents' reaction will be different, because he was scolded for leaving them at the bridge, and now once again he put himself in danger. But now, all he can do is smile for the photo. Some time passes and a festival is held at the protagonist's school. Everyone gathers for a play in which Jeon Hae-yang is playing Snow White. Her character is described as someone with a good heart and loved by the 7 dwarfs. The audience has fun watching the performance, except for the protagonist who was forced to participate. Eun Hyuk panics because he forgot his lines, but the protagonist calms him down, saying he only has one line and just needs to say it right. They've been getting along better since the incident. Eun Hyuk started calling the protagonist captain, and now treats him like a true hero. Back to the children's play, Min Jin is also participating, playing the witch. She offers the apple to Snow White, just like in the original story. But then, the 7 dwarfs try to convince the princess not to eat the fruit, saying it's poisoned. However, Eun Hyuk gets a bit too excited, and yells at the princess not to eat it. His acting was so bad it shocked everyone, but the audience burst out laughing. Min Jin throws the apple toward the princess, but it ends up landing right in Eun Hyuk's mouth, and he falls to the ground afterward. Accidentally, the play script ends up changing, so the teacher improvises and says the witch didn't give up on her plan. Then Min Jin grabs another apple and forces the princess to eat it. After biting into the poisoned apple, the princess collapses to the floor unconscious, and both of them are carried off stage. The teacher approaches the protagonist and says he's the only one she can count on now, because the teachers placed bets on which class would perform best, and she's counting on him to win. Next, the protagonist, playing the prince, approaches the unconscious Snow White, but when everyone sees him on stage, they're shocked, since No Yunha became known as the boy who defeated a monster, and the fact that a child did this makes him terrifying to the others. Upon hearing that, No Yunha remembers his past and how he was treated by those around him. He freezes up a bit during the play, but from the audience, his sister calls out to him, and his whole family supports him to keep acting, including his newest little brother. That makes the atmosphere a bit lighter, and No Yunha manages to continue with the play. He gathers his courage and keeps playing the prince. After that, he kisses the princess on the forehead, waking her from her deep sleep and bringing the play to an end. With that, the audience applauds the children's performance, and they leave the stage triumphant. Soon after, the other children come up too, and lift No Yunha in celebration, tossing him up. The protagonist gets scared, saying it's dangerous. No Yunha ends up falling, but his father catches him before he hits the ground. His performance is praised by his father. Not just him, his entire family gathers around. His mother takes the opportunity to ask if No Yunha has decided what he wants to do when he grows up. No Yunha thinks his mother asked the same thing last year. At the time, he didn't know what to do, and this time is no different. but there is one thing he knows, that regardless of his choices, he wants to be happy, and he doesn't want anyone to stop him from that. Then jokingly, he says maybe he wants to be a warrior. His mother rejoices at her son's words. She hopes her son does whatever he wants because she'll always be cheering for him. A time skip occurs in the story. We see that the end of the 3rd year of kindergarten has come, and at 8 years old, No Yunha enters regular school. But during the principal's speech, he blurts out and ends up being scolded by Min Jin. Even Jeon Haeng speaks up, asking both of them to stay quiet. Since everyone was talking anyway, Yoon Hyung takes the opportunity to ask if the protagonist will take the ace position. He replies no, and asks Yoon Hyung to be quiet. Even so, Yoon Hyung keeps fooling around during the whole speech. A while later, Min Jin is the first to introduce herself to the new class. The girl gets excited and starts talking a bunch about herself. Their teacher, named Eugenia, says they don't have much time, so Min Jin doesn't need to tell her whole life story today. Once Min Jin stops talking, everyone feels relieved. They didn't have to hear her entire life story. The teacher says the next to introduce himself is No Yuna. Unlike the chatty girl, he gets straight to the point and only says what's necessary. His teacher is surprised by his few words, but decides to move on with the introductions. Jeon Haeng is next, but she's very shy, so she struggles to introduce herself. Seeing his classmate all frozen up, No Yunha remembers his vacation. A flashback shows that he and some classmates went to Jeon Haeng's house. Her father, very friendly, offered food and drinks to everyone. But when No Yunha saw the girl's father, he had the feeling he had seen him before. He just didn't remember where. Regardless, the girl's father prepared a real feast for the children. The kids ate and found the meal very tasty. Min Jin praised Mr. Jong and took the chance to brag about being friends with Haeyang. Because of that, she got to enjoy such amazing food. The protagonist, however, didn't understand why everyone was praising it so much. But when he drank the beverage that had been prepared for him, he realized it wasn't just a normal drink, because after drinking it, his mana started to recover. That's when he noticed the drink was actually a potion, just like the ones players use in their missions. Noticing the protagonist's strange reaction, Jeon Haeng asked if he didn't like the drink. No Yunha said it wasn't that, and used the moment to ask her father's name. The girl replied that her father's name was Jong Seokun. After hearing the name, the protagonist instantly told her that from now on, they were best friends. He recognized the name because Jong Seokun is the man who will revolutionize the potion market in the future. From carefully selecting ingredients to having the gift of mana extraction, Jong Seokun possesses the gift of filtration. In the future, he will become the supreme king of potions and of the Alice Group, one of the top 3 companies in South Korea. The protagonist never knew that Seokun had a daughter, until he realizes that Haeyang is only alive because he saved her from the goblins. Then No Yunha tells the girl that if anyone gives her trouble at the new school, he'll handle it himself. Back in the present, Haeyang overcomes her nervousness and manages to introduce herself. The class teacher thanks her and says that the next one to introduce herself is Jin Seona. The protagonist is startled when he looks at this girl, because not only him, but everyone else notices that Jin Seona is a demi-human. Demi-humans are people born with altered genes due to the effects of poorly distributed mana. They are generally looked down upon, even being compared to monsters. Because of this, Jin Seona has extreme difficulty introducing herself, as she is not only shy but also insecure about her appearance. To cut off the gossip in the classroom, the teacher says the next one to introduce himself is Eun Hyunk. After introducing himself, Eun Hyunk says that he is learning to manipulate mana with his captain. He points at the protagonist, who shrinks in embarrassment. Soon, the teacher cuts short his long and enthusiastic introduction, and she tells No Yunha to stay after class, as she wants to discuss something with him in the presence of his parents. The protagonist becomes extremely irritated and thinks he will go much harder on An Kyung during training because of this. After the introductions, they go for lunch, and in the meantime, the protagonist reflects a bit about the amount of mana in his class. He knows that Eun Hyuk and Seona are above average, and Haeyang's mana cannot be estimated. However, this information was kept hidden for the girl's own safety, and he is the only one who knows, since he can see people's mana. Either way, he sits with his friends and decides to have a normal lunch. Eun Hyung gets up to get seconds. The protagonist says it's already the 3rd time he's going for more, and that the cafeteria lady will remember his face. In turn, Min Jin says she also feels like eating more. No Yunha takes the opportunity to tease her, calling her a worm. While they're bickering, something catches everyone's attention. Jin Seon appears, and wherever she goes, she draws attention. People talk badly about her behind her back, making Jin Seona feel so uncomfortable that she can't find a place to sit. As she walks a bit, she sees an empty spot and asks if she can sit there. But she ends up being rejected by the other girls. One girl says no. Right away, the protagonist notices that of all the tables, she happened to ask Jin Sena's table. The snobby girl looks down on Seona for trying to sit at the same table as her. The other girls not only refuse her but also mock her. because they don't just find fault with Siona's appearance, but with her clothes as well. Siona feels embarrassed and gives up on sitting there. The protagonist's friends get angry at how the snobby girl treated Siona. For his part, the protagonist remembers something upon seeing this situation. Once he heard that not all demi-humans are kind. An ally said that it's natural to think the poorer a person is, the kinder their heart. He also said that this can happen, but it's the exception, not the rule. His ally was also a demi-human, and he thought his boss was helping others because of him, but warned him not to do that. At the time, No Yunha got irritated, telling Jin Parang that he was not a good person, and said that he wasn't like the others, so he would act however he saw fit. Jin Parang was so startled that he immediately began apologizing. As his superior, No Yunha ordered his ally to get out of his sight and stand guard outside the camp. At that time, they were in the Abyss dungeon. The two had joined forces to face monsters inside. However, the protagonist's ally got injured during the fight. A mantis-type monster struck him directly, but before it could finish the job, the protagonist appeared and destroyed one of its limbs, thus helping Jin Parang, who was wounded. The monster became furious and attacked with greater intensity, but Yunha held his ground. He sliced the monster so fast that it didn't even see where the attack came from. After that, he went to his ally. Even wounded, Jin Parang told No Yunha not to stop because of him, and that he should continue with the expedition. The group's healer appeared soon after to heal him. However, Parang refused help, claiming that the reason he accepted this job was to kill monsters, so his leader should continue instead of standing there. No Yunha then asked if his ally had any last words to say. Parang says his leader should remember what he said about demi-humans. He claims that there are many demi-humans out there, but not all of them should be ignored. After all, he himself is one of the bad demi-humans. After that, he perished for good. In No Yunha's arms, back in the present, the protagonist wonders why he's remembering this, of all times, right now. He then gets up from his desk and asks his friends to prepare one more spot. After that, he goes to the demi-human girl. No Yunha tells her that there's an empty seat at his table, and she can join them. Jin Siona feels a bit awkward about accepting, but he insists on bringing her to his table, claiming that he and his friends made space for her. The girl says that things might get difficult for anyone who helps her. Even so, the protagonist insists, saying he doesn't care about that. Jin Siona's friends ask if they need to dig up information on the protagonist. Jin Siona says there's no need, claiming that the protagonist and his friends are people of low status, and she can tell that simply by judging their behavior. Jin Siona ends up joining the boys' table, and even though she's shy, she's warmly welcomed. Jong Haeyang offers her some tea, and says the two of them can be friends from now on. The girl takes the tea and drinks it quickly. The protagonist tells her she doesn't need to rush, since they're not going to take her food. At that, Jin Siona starts crying because she's not used to being treated like this. Sometime later, the children gather to play, but the protagonist suggests a different kind of hide and seek, where the others should either suppress their mana to hide from him or use mana to boost their physical abilities. Jin Siona says she doesn't know how to control mana, but No Yunha says that won't stop her from joining in. He thinks that later he can teach her how to use her unique telepathy ability. But for now, he decides to start the game, telling the others to hide while he counts. After counting for a while, the protagonist begins to search. However, it doesn't take him long to find most of his classmates. No Yunha can't sense Haeyang's presence because her mana control is excellent, so he decides to go after Jin Siona first. After focusing, he senses the girl hiding nearby, but when he finds her, Siona runs off, leaving him behind. The protagonist tries to catch up to her in the chase, but she can also jump very high. She says she won't lose as long as No Yunha doesn't touch her. The other children didn't know about this rule, so since they were found but not tagged, they start running too. This leaves the protagonist desperate, since now he'll have to chase everyone. Earlier, Jong Haeyang was looking for a place to hide. She also knew she needed to suppress her mana, but while she was focusing on that, she ended up finding a place full of books, and decided to take a look. Since she's passionate about reading, upon seeing so many books, she felt like she was in heaven. A bit lost and unsure where she was, she figured she probably shouldn't stay there. However, one specific book completely caught her attention. But as soon as she picked it up, the owner of the place appeared, and startled her with his sudden appearance. After realizing her friend was missing, the others went to look for her, until the protagonist followed the girl's mana trail, and found her in the library reading the book with an elderly man. No Yunha says he only came there because he was looking for Jong Haeyang, since she had disappeared. The other children just watch as the protagonist scolds his friend. He was furious about her vanishing, saying she should at least let him know if she was going somewhere else in the middle of a game like that. Then he apologizes for the interruption, but the old man says he was bored and loves having company to read with. He then says Jong Haeyang is good company, and she can come back anytime she wants a good read. She then says she'll come back tomorrow so they can finish the book. The protagonist says they should head home, but the old man says he can't let them go alone and offers them a ride. He takes the children to his car, offering to drive them all home. No Yunha watches everyone getting in and having fun in the fancy car. He tries to figure out who this old man is and doesn't get in the car. However, seeing everyone having fun makes him feel jealous since he's never been in a car like that before. A few days later, they're back at school. The teacher announces an election for class president and writes No Yunha's name on the board. Surprised, he asks why he was nominated as a candidate. Minji says that someone nominated him while he was distracted. The protagonist asks who did it, and she reveals that it was none other than Eun Hyunk. No Yunha doesn't like this one bit and thinks that later he will get back at Hyunk for it. He tries to withdraw as a candidate, claiming he's not qualified. However, his teacher states that one of his classmates believes in him, so he can't ignore that. No Yunha insists he's not qualified, but his teacher says he shouldn't ignore his limitless potential. The protagonist is outraged that Minji didn't tell him this sooner, but she did it on purpose to annoy him. Next, the teacher says the class has only one candidate and asks if anyone else wants to volunteer. Jin Sina raises her hand. She says she wants to be a candidate. Sometime later, she shows up with a box full of hamburgers. She claims her father paid for them and hands them out to the class, trying to use this to trade for votes in her favor. Jin Sina even promises to repeat this once a month if elected. The girl even offers a hamburger to the protagonist, trying to bribe him, but he refuses and leaves her talking to herself. Not only him, but his friends also refuse, and this ends up serving as motivation for No Yunha to take this election seriously. A few days pass, and the students go on the school's spring field trip. The teacher decides to take attendance with the students and asks the class presidents to help. It's revealed that Jin Sina won the election. As for No Yunha, he got the vice presidency. Either way, the whole class enjoys the trip, and they even manage to have fun. At lunchtime, the protagonist opens his lunchbox and sees a note from his sister. He feels a bit embarrassed when he sees it, and Minji takes the chance to tease him a little. She shows her lunch as well, but it's John Haeyang's lunchbox that draws attention. He reveals that he has something amazing to eat, since it was his father who made it. Unlike the others, Eun Hyunk didn't bring lunch, because his mother gave him a cup of noodles, saying it would be better than something homemade. The others feel awkward when they notice this. They think their classmate's mother must be very busy to prepare something for him, so they decide to share some of their food with Eun Hyunk. Far from there, a man runs from something dangerous. In his desperation, he ends up tripping and falls to the ground, left completely vulnerable. Before he can do anything, monsters appear right in front of him. They are a pack of level 7 hunting dogs. The man even tries to call for help, but the alpha of the dogs appears right then, wiping out any chance he had of surviving. The pack leader tells the others to stop devouring the prey. He can communicate perfectly with the rest and even uses his powers to intimidate them. With that, he orders them all to move forward, because he wants to head down to the south of the mountain. While the protagonist focuses on enjoying the trip with his friends, he has no idea of the danger that is approaching. Back with the children, they decide to play treasure hunt. The protagonist tries to talk them out of it, but Eun Hyunk is super excited to find the treasure. Minji also gets excited and says they should go into the forest to look for it. The protagonist thinks it's kind of boring and says he'll sit this one out. However, Minji doesn't let him back out. No Yunha thinks he doesn't want to walk, he'd rather be at home. Besides, he knows that the Uijeonggu district is just beyond this mountain, and thanks to the future, he knows things. Until in the middle of the walk, the whole group is startled by a scream. They wonder what's going on. However, No Yunha tells everyone to be quiet. Then one of the dogs passes nearby. It doesn't take long for the monster to catch the children's scent. Minji gets scared when she sees one of them up close. The dog approaches the children, about to attack. No Yunha hadn't expected this to happen today. The flower viewing incident on Bukin Mountain was a known event in his past life. Seoul was protected by the cocoon, yet for some reason, the monsters from the Uijeonggu district broke through the cocoon and headed south, causing a tragic incident with many casualties. Either way, they're caught up in this. The dog lunges toward Minji. In an attempt to run, she trips and falls. But before she can be hit, the dog is pushed away by the protagonist. It becomes vulnerable and the protagonist closes in. After that, No Yunha grabs a fork and uses it as a weapon, coating it with mana. While he defeats the creature, his friends witness everything in shock. After finishing, he asks Minji if she's okay. She says she is, but the others also worry about him. They were scared after seeing him fight the dog. No Yunha says he's fine and that he was just a bit agitated. The protagonist thinks that when he fights monsters, he becomes a cold player who goes wild, just like in his past life. And with that, he ended up showing his friends a side of himself he wanted to keep secret. Even so, he knows he can't just stand there. So he says they need to run away as soon as possible. After all, hunting dogs always travel in packs. With that, he gets his companion's attention and reveals his strategy. Meanwhile, the other students are enjoying the trip. They organize a treasure hunt, but Jin Sina isn't interested in participating, so she tells her followers to go in her place. The children don't seem too excited. However, with just a look, Jin Sina convinces them, and they run off to look for the treasure. but it doesn't take long for them to come back in a panic. Startled, Jin Sina asks what happened. They say a monster is approaching. Jin Sina doesn't have time to run, and she ends up becoming an easy target because she stayed sitting where she was, and one of the dogs lunges toward her. But just when she thinks her end is near, someone kills the monster before it can hurt her. She opens her eyes, still frightened, and extremely confused by everything that just happened. The protagonist approaches and says that if Jin Sina doesn't want to die, she should get down the mountain. He also says he's already done enough and will leave the rest to her, but the girl doesn't want to be left alone, claiming that he should protect her. However, No Yunha tells her to turn around and stay out of his way. Before that, the protagonist had told En Hyunk to run down the mountain with his friends, and if they saw anyone, to call for the players. Meanwhile, he said he would go after the other children, and his friend offered to go with him. However, the protagonist warned En Hyunk not to mess around, since he was trusting him with the group's leadership. En Hyunk apologizes for slipping up, as he wants to earn the captain's trust no matter what. No Yunha says that from now on, they will be a group and should keep one thing in mind. He then warns them of the dangers a hunting dog can pose and tells them to compress their mana so as not to attract them. After instructing them, the protagonist heads toward his objective. He takes what's left of Haeyang's food and scatters it on the ground, saying that this food contains a high amount of mana, which confuses the dog's sense of smell. With that, he scans the surroundings to identify enemies, and realizes he's managed to draw them toward himself, buying more time for his friends to escape. After that, the protagonist heads toward the enemies, but on the way, he notices there are too many of them. Not to mention, he doesn't have enough mana to take them all on, but just in case, he has a utility to use in moderation. However, he doesn't have much time to think, since some people are being attacked and crying out for help. The monsters are devouring their prey. With that, there's only one option left for the protagonist: charge into the attack. No Yunha arrives already attacking the dogs, but he's late as the players have already been defeated. However, upon noticing that these people were players, he takes the opportunity to grab their weapons. He spots a dagger and thinks it will do, since he can't wield a long, heavy sword. Besides, this dagger is made of mana-infused metal, which helps a lot. After all, it will let him save his own mana. Now armed, he takes the chance to challenge the dogs to attack him. The protagonist draws the enemy's attention, who immediately charge at him, but when he uses the newly acquired weapon, it proves to be quite effective in combat. Since the number of monsters is large, the weapon alone isn't enough to face them, and he also needs to use his mana to enhance his attacks. The enemies attack relentlessly, but No Yunhei uses his magic and proves superior. He moves to higher ground, and from above, unleashes several mana blasts, making it rain-piercing projectiles onto the enemies. When he lands, the protagonist takes the opportunity to strike the most vulnerable enemies. Not only that, but he also summons a magic seal, which upon exploding creates a massive shockwave. This way, it doesn't take him long to defeat all the enemies. Back in the present, the protagonist tells Jin Sina she needs to handle herself. He says that on the way, he saw her bodyguard and reveals that he was in bad shape and needed medical attention. Therefore, she should move, because if she stands still, she'll be an easy target. Jin Sina is left alone by the protagonist. However, after seeing him in action, she concludes that she needs No Yunha nearby. Shortly after, the protagonist advances through the forest and finds the rest of the pack and the leader of the dogs. The enemy tries to attack before the protagonist gets close, but No Yunha says the dog can try as much as it wants, but it won't be able to defeat him. No Yunha arrives already striking everyone with his magic. He throws darts on the ground, sending shocks through them. They all get hit, except for the pack's leader. The leader of the monsters orders his whole pack to attack, but this doesn't shake the protagonist, because he waits for the dogs to get closer to attack with more precision. The protagonist finds it far too easy to deal with these dogs, and claims the enemies are really annoying. Before leaving his friends, No Yunha gave very clear instructions, which the boys intend to follow to the letter. But during their escape, they end up facing a crossroads. En Hyunk asks which way they should go. Joan Haeyang replies that she's too tired to decide. The protagonist left her and Siona with the group's trackers, so even tired, she knows what needs to be done. After analyzing the surroundings, Joan Haeyang says there's something bad to the left. Siona confirms, so they decide to go right. The whole group starts running again, until the leader wonders why he hasn't seen any players nearby. Minji grabs his arm and says there's no time for that. They have to keep running. She had instructions from the protagonist not to let anyone do anything stupid. That's why she tries to guide them toward the objective. However, danger shows itself to them again. The group spots an aura of bad energy just ahead, and from inside that energy emerges a monster even worse than the previous ones. Not only that, but the dog howls and calls the other nearby dogs over. This way, the whole group ends up surrounded. The protagonist had warned that Yoon Hyuk was the strongest in the group, so he should protect the rest and fight if needed. With that responsibility in mind, he remembers the training he had with his captain. This gives him the courage to face the monsters. When attacking some of the enemies, he manages to hit one of the dogs, and ends up getting a bit carried away. That only makes the dogs even more furious. The monsters charge forward once more. However, Yunhyang fights back, yet this time he is also hit. With that, he's not only out of the fight, but also leaves his group unprotected. Jin Siona quickly realizes the dogs are toying with their prey, and imagines her friend won't last long. Even injured, the boy doesn't give up, because his captain entrusted him with this mission, and he doesn't want to disappoint him. Through this, a strength emerges from within the boy, allowing him to land a punch on one of the monsters, something previously unimaginable. The boy himself is stunned by his power awakening, but in that moment of distraction, he's attacked. Yunhyang is thrown far away. Not only that, but he's left completely vulnerable. The girls are extremely worried about him, especially Jin Siona, who can't stand seeing a friend in that state. She remembers how she was welcomed by the group, and the moments they spent together. The other girls rush at the monster as well, wanting to do something. Meanwhile, Jin Siona begs for help. With that, a large amount of energy is generated from her. The monsters sense something different happening around them and become quite frightened. Then, a force field is created around the children. Along with it, several whirlwinds push the enemies away. The girls realize that inside the force field, they're safe. So they decide to go to Yunhyang to help him. In the midst of all the chaos, a player appears. The woman approaches the children, telling them to close their eyes for a moment. She is one of the 12 monarchs and calls herself Shin Shuyeon, also known as the Divine Wind, and says she will finish off the monsters. On the other side, the protagonist is facing the pack leader. Before confronting him, he takes the opportunity to drink a potion and charge his mana. With that, No Yunha declares that all the monsters have already lost. He then launches his attack with no intention of losing and strikes the enemies hard. No Yunha tells the monsters not to act like good little dogs, saying that he'll treat them as the monsters they truly are. The protagonist makes quick and precise attacks and always hits a large number of enemies, making them seem less dangerous than they really are. After that, he approaches the last dog and says that only the leader is left. But as soon as he charges forward, his body feels the exhaustion of mana. He realizes he's overdoing it, but he can't stop. The enemy doesn't hold back and manages to bite the protagonist's sword without getting hurt. So No Yunha decides to switch to firearms, but he can't pierce the enemy. Not only that, but the dog prepares to attack with fire, making the protagonist realize he's fallen into a trap. No Yunha is forced to retreat. He tries to shoot again, but the result is the same as before, forcing him to rethink his strategy. Not only that, he realizes his mana is running out, but luckily for him, the enemy is tired too. In turn, the dog leader calls the protagonist an arrogant human and launches a new attack. To the protagonist's surprise, the enemy had been keeping a trick up its sleeve this whole time. No Yunha wonders if the enemy is trying to gather mist to attack. In turn, the enemy claims it's going to win. So for the protagonist, no matter what happens, he wants to defeat the dog no matter what. But he ends up getting caught in the mist attack and thinks it might be poison. This way, there's no other choice but to finish this quickly. But inside the mist, the enemy attacks again with fire. No Yunha manages to defend himself, but his mana is running out. Because of that, he gets hit. The protagonist hadn't expected this, since he was counting on his mana and didn't think he would run dry. This makes him remember something from his past. Once he was surrounded by several monsters and left vulnerable. However, a member of his team knew that No Yunha had the gift known as Rage, which activates in extreme situations. Just like in the past, No Yunha activates his Rage, which startles his opponent. No Yunha doesn't care about talking anymore. He charges into the attack and manages to hit the monster, wounding it badly. After that, the dog isolates itself inside a sphere of energy. But No Yunha says that won't protect it, because this barrier isn't unbreakable. With his sword, he manages to pierce the shield, once again claiming that the monster has already lost this fight. After that, he passes through the shield, and with a fatal blow, he finishes his enemy once and for all. Then he stops to rest while watching the sunset. But due to mana exhaustion, No Yunha collapses right there. Back with the children, Shin Suyeon promises to take down the monsters. She's irritated with the situation, because she thinks the ones responsible for guarding the place didn't do their job properly, and that's why she had to intervene. Either way, now she'll have to fight, so she summons more of her tornadoes, firing them all at the monsters. After defeating the dogs with extreme ease, she releases the boys from the force field. Seeing their frightened faces, Shin Suyeon apologizes for what happened and says everything is fine now. The children recognize her as one of the 12 monarchs and thank her for the help, taking the chance to flatter her a little, which surprises her since she imagined that after going through something like this, the children would be in shock. Shin Suyeon takes the chance to check if they have any internal injuries, but her analysis reveals the large amount of mana in Jeon Haeyang. She then hugs the girl and asks if she'd like to become a player. Hyun interrupts and says he's the one who should get that offer. Shin Suyeon admires his courage. She finds the children extremely cute and hugs them. After that, she looks at Siona and says she only found them thanks to the signal the girls sent. Jin Siona had been feeling useless until now, but upon hearing that, she's happy and hugs the player too. After chatting a bit, she tells the children to go down the mountain since there's a rescue team there. Meanwhile, she says she needs to go help other people and apologizes for letting them go alone. Right after, another player appears. His arrival is a bit intimidating for the children. He's called Kang Cheol, also known as Excavator, and says it was tough climbing up there alone. Shin Seoyoung says the children can follow Kang, and they'll be safe with him. But Eun Hyung says they can't go without their captain. Speaking of him, the protagonist has another glimpse of his past. He remembers the time he was scolded by Lee Yujun because he was always getting injured on missions, and she was the one responsible for healing him. At the time, No Yun-ha tried to apologize. However, Lee Yujun didn't want an apology and said that instead, he should give her some of his time on the weekend. Some time later, the protagonist wakes up. He realizes he's in a hospital, but he doesn't see any injuries on his body, which he finds strange. Then Shin Seoyoung approaches and asks if he feels pain anywhere. The protagonist says no. He recognizes her but didn't expect to meet a member of the 12 monarchs. Shin Seoyoung says she found him and brought him to the hospital right after. They formally introduce themselves, but the protagonist doesn't want her to know about his fight, so he tries to be discreet. Then he asks if his friends are okay and how long he's been there. The woman replies that it's only been 6 hours since he arrived and claims that all his friends are fine. She also says she called his parents, who will arrive soon. The protagonist immediately thinks he might be in trouble again. In any case, Shin Seoyoung says she's conducting an investigation into what happened and asks what he was doing at the scene. She also asks who killed all the monsters. The protagonist tries to dodge the question and says he doesn't remember very well, only that he was running away, which is why he was there. He also says that someone might have saved his life before he passed out. However, Shin Seoyoung doesn't believe this version. She believes it was the boy himself who defeated the monsters and pressures him to tell the truth. No Yunha again tries to dodge the question, claiming there's no way he could have killed so many monsters. Shin Seoyoung says she thought the same, but upon researching him, she discovered the boy had received a bravery award for defeating some monsters. And it can't be a simple coincidence that he was in the same place where several monsters were defeated, not to mention that his fingerprints were found on a knife at the scene. With that, the protagonist is cornered and realizes he won't be able to fool her, so he proposes a deal to her, saying that if she keeps it a secret, he will reveal important information. Shin Seoyoung quickly notices the boy's change in behavior and becomes curious about this supposed information. She then asks what the protagonist wants. He replies that his only wish is to continue living a normal life. Before Shin Seoyoung leaves the hospital, the protagonist tells her to investigate the heirs of the Dangdang group, especially the girls. He also tells her to check their connection with the Lord of the Blue Ocean group. Shocked by what she just heard, Shin Seoyoung asks if the boy can stand by what he said. He says that if she doesn't find anything, he will agree to join her clan. Shin Seoyoung says it's not that easy to enter the Blue Ocean clan, but No Yunha says she knows very well what his potential is. In any case, she claims this deal would only benefit him. However, No Yunha says she could confirm her husband's integrity and also gain a precious talent. Already inside her car, she orders her employee to investigate all the heirs of the Dangdang group, especially the women. She also tells him to try to find out if there's any connection between them and her husband. Shin Seoyoung remembers that the boy knew she was taking part in the stabilization of the Gangnam district, and he warned her to be careful with new monsters, because if she underestimated them in favor of the rankings, things wouldn't end well. Even shocked by how much information the boy had, she agreed to follow through with the deal they made, because even though he was a cocky kid, she found No Yunha quite entertaining. Some time later, news of the dog attack spreads in the media. Shin Seoyoung was credited as the main player responsible for dealing with the situation. However, what stood out were the casualties. Because of that, the families of the deceased pressured the authorities. The nation's leader publicly apologized, and shortly afterward, he disconnected from the server called Life. A few months later, Siona celebrated another birthday. However, this time she had friends by her side. Her friends gave her presents, and she cried with emotion. Meanwhile, the boys planned to throw a party. Jin Siona was a bit confused by all of this. Her friends tried to act natural, because they didn't want to ruin the surprise. Then later that same day, she was surprised with a party in her honor. All her friends showed up and helped with the preparations. She even suspected they were planning something, and because of that, she thanked them. Minji told her she could save the tears for later because now it was time to make a wish and blow out the candles. They also took a picture to remember this amazing moment. In the middle of the party, Minji says that Jin Sina threatened an employee to make sure her father would attend his own party. The protagonist knows that the KK Group, the 7th largest financial group in Korea, has electricity, architecture, and advertising as its main businesses. But they are small in the pharmaceutical industry, especially since Jong Si-kun merged the medical companies to monopolize the potion market. So he scolds Minji, saying that if she were the direct heir of KK, Her last name should be Kim, but her name is Jin, which means she shouldn't worry about that, and should just enjoy the party. No Yunha thinks things got a bit complicated, but it's fine, because he doesn't care about the groups, their size, or their connections, since his goal is to protect his family, and for that, he will crush anyone who tries to harm them. Back at school, the protagonist's class is taking part in an athletics tournament. In Hyunk is super excited to win, since his wish is to impress his captain. However, No Yunha notices that not only he but the others are also excited, and he asks why. Minji says the teacher promised to buy food if their class won. The teacher herself regretted that promise, thinking her money wouldn't be enough to buy food for everyone. Either way, Yeon Hyung gets ready to run. When the race starts, he bursts forward like a rocket, because he used his mana to run faster than the others. However, near the finish line, he starts slowing down. Right after, he feels his body get heavy and collapses on the track. The protagonist thinks this was bound to happen, since his classmate didn't control his mana as he should. Even so, the teacher picked Eun Hyuk up and ran with him to the finish line, because she wanted him to finish the race. But the one who ended up winning the race was the protagonist's sister, who then ran over to celebrate with him. Seeing how No Yunha behaves with his sister, Minji thinks he's spoiled by her. Then Jin Seona arrives tired and frustrated for losing. She also confronts No Yunha for cheering for his sister instead of his friends. Either way, she decides to let it go, because they see Haeyang approaching. Before going to her friends, the girl goes to the protagonist's neighbors, the couple Julieta and Bruno, because she had asked them for help in the race. Julieta helped and motivated her to run, so the protagonist asks what his friend got in exchange for bringing Julieta there. Haeyang replies that she got an Americano, even though Julieta is Italian. For No Yunha, this is unexpected, because the first time he met Haeyang, she was a crybaby, and now she seems more mature and smart. On the other hand, the same can't be said about Eun Hyuk, who keeps showing himself to be more immature. Then the protagonist shows up with food, and says his mother made it, but then he sees an unfamiliar woman and asks who she is. Haeyang says she's a newly hired teacher, and the protagonist finds her familiar but can't remember from where. After walking a bit, he finds Jin Sena's booth, and the girl invites him for some tea. The protagonist refuses and leads her talking to herself. However, the girl doesn't let him leave so easily and tells her father that he's the boy she mentioned earlier. In turn, Jin Young-woon, CEO of KK Pharmaceuticals and the girl's father, says he's finally met the boy who bullies his daughter and asks what his father does. No Yunha simply says that the daughter behaves just like the father and claims he's too arrogant for someone who runs a mere pharmaceutical company. Furious, Jin Young-woon raises his hand to hit the boy, but midway he's startled by something and wonders how a mere boy can have such a wicked expression. He thinks this boy behaves exactly like the president he fears. The protagonist knows this and mocks him. At that, the old man gets angry again and moves to attack. But to the protagonist's surprise, his father appears and intervenes on his behalf. His father asks how someone dares to mess with his son. Then he worries about his son, but the biggest concern comes from the protagonist, since this was the last thing he wanted. Jin Young-woon is furious for being struck in front of his daughter, and orders his security guards to hold the protagonist's father. No Yunha gets worried, because he wanted to handle this alone, and now he might end up having to fight. However, his father takes responsibility and says he will handle it himself. Jin Young-woon stands up furiously, asking the protagonist's father if he knows him. No says yes, and that the old man is the president of the KK Pharmaceutical Company. He also says the old man probably doesn't remember him, since his haircut has changed. But when No fixes his hair, Jin Young-woon recognizes him as the head of the serious section. Jin Young-woon then realizes that's why the boy was so confident. However, the protagonist himself is shocked, as he didn't even know this about his own father. The Sirius Group is the second largest corporation in South Korea, a company that primarily produces automobiles and devices for players. No asks if the old man remembers him now. Immediately, Jin Young-woon apologizes, but asks why the head of the strategic management planning section is there. The protagonist's father replies that he came to watch the children's sports day, but had his moment of leisure interrupted by all this commotion. Jin Young-woon apologizes again, this time as politely as possible, knowing that his company is nowhere near the level of the one No works for. He says his daughter would also like to apologize, but the girl refuses. Right away, her father gives her a frightening look, and Jin Sena realizes the situation is quite serious. Not only that, but she notices that her classmates are watching and listening to everything, and they think it's well-deserved, since she always bullies others using her father's name. With that, she is left speechless, and her only option is to apologize as well. She can't keep up her attitude and runs off. That way, Mr. No decides to leave too, and the protagonist already imagines the scolding he's going to get. However, his father simply says that if something like this happens again, he shouldn't try to handle it alone and should tell him immediately. He also says that No Yunha is just a child, and there's nothing wrong with relying on his parents. His father's words make little No Yunha feel something different. A comfort fills his heart, one he never wants to lose, even as an adult in the body of a child, far away in a destroyed building. A man in a suit tells another that he had to come there just to contact him. He also says that there are people bothering him and he needs help dealing with it. The hooded man asks what the payment will be. In turn, the client offers $3 million, half in advance, and the other half upon completion of the job. With that, the hooded man agrees to the job and uses his powers to leave, taking the money with him. The client, instead of being startled like his employee, actually starts laughing, as if he knows the job will get done. Back to the protagonist, he and his sister go to the mall. He doesn't like it much, as it's been a while since he last went to a place like that, and he finds it a bit tiring. Giulietta and Bruno are accompanying the children. The woman says he can't get tired yet since they've barely started the outing. The protagonist feels comfortable around her, but the same can't be said about Bruno, because he wonders how a normal office worker can hide his mana so perfectly. He decides to keep an eye on Bruno, but in a moment of distraction, he loses sight of Giulietta and his sister. Bruno then tells him not to worry about it, because he has a tracker to locate Giulietta in real time. The protagonist asks if Giulietta knows about this, but Bruno says it's a secret, which makes him seem even more suspicious. However, while they look for the girls, the hooded man from earlier appears, and as soon as he spots the protagonist, he says it's time to begin. No Yunha senses a strange aura, and when he looks to the side, he notices the hooded man. Not only that, but he also recognizes the man's tattoo, which immediately brings back memories of his past. Once, No Yunha fought an enemy who had that exact same tattoo, and now the same man is near him again. Bruno notices the boy's unease and asks what's wrong. The protagonist says something strange is going on. Meanwhile, No Yunha scans the area carefully and notices there's more than one suspicious guy. In fact, there are 3 of them nearby. They all have a strange aura, noticeable from afar. Because of that, No Yunha uses his powers and throws mana spheres in the direction of the targets. However, the tattooed man is the only one not hit. No Yunha tells Bruno that they should hide. He knows these men are well-trained players, while some dispersed. The one who had been sitting stayed and kept watching. No Yunha decided to follow one of them, until he noticed the bald man taking something out of his pocket and dropping a magic stone. But before the protagonist could do anything, a large amount of mana spread through the mall, and this began to attract monsters to the location. People were attacked, and an evacuation alert was issued. In turn, the tattooed man ordered his allies to eliminate anyone in their way. Desperate, the protagonist thinks that before returning, he had no knowledge of an attack like this, which means that from the bridge onward, the future has truly changed. But now he has no time to think about that, because one of the monsters charges toward him, only for Bruno to stop the creature from attacking the boy. Then he tells the protagonist they need to find the girls. They go after them, following Bruno's tracker, but as they climb the stairs, they come across one of the enemies. The protagonist immediately gets ready to fight, but before he can act, Bruno launches his attack and knocks the enemy down with a single blow. No Yunha approaches and says Bruno can't finish this guy off yet, claiming that afterward, it becomes hard to get rid of them. The protagonist thinks he had a lot of trouble with this before returning and doesn't want to deal with it again. Either way, he decides to move on and urges Bruno to hurry. As soon as the monster attack alert was given, people started running. But No Yunha didn't panic, as she chose to analyze the situation, and with her mana, she was able to see all the monsters around. She then told Giulietta that she would protect her, but the girl got distracted by everything, right at the moment when a monster attacked. At that, Giulietta decided to act and pulled her away. After getting the girl out of danger, she faced the monster, revealing herself to be a mana user as well. The girl is surprised, as she never imagined that about Giulietta. Either way, the woman says they need to hurry, as the boys are waiting for them. Then they see more monsters approaching and decide to run away. Giulietta, however, tries to slow them down and attacks with mana. But the monsters are faster than she expected, and at this pace her mana could run out soon. No Yunha spots an escalator and says they can use it. However, Giulietta says it's dangerous. As soon as No Yunha tries to climb, a monster attacks her. But unlike at the bridge, this time she doesn't feel fear. Therefore, she uses her courage to fight. This way, she manages to kick the monster and send it flying. Giulietta comes closer, saying she was scared, and asks if the girl is okay. No Yunha says yes, but now they're surrounded. The woman says the only option is to run for the stairs, so the two dash toward the staircase and jump to reach their goal. Meanwhile, Giulietta thinks she doesn't have any weapon on her, so fighting empty-handed will be hard. Right after, she's attacked, but manages to grab an object nearby and uses it to defend herself, protecting both her and the girl. On the other side, the protagonist is also fighting, but instead of monsters, he's facing humans. After beating one of the enemies, he says it's done and they can move on. No Yunha ends up spotting his sister from afar. Not only that, but he also sees monsters being kicked away. Looking more closely at the girls, he realizes the two are doing well, so he tells Bruno to grab some weapons and head up quickly. The protagonist ends up finding a dagger. In the middle of this, Bruno notices something different. He sees an enemy on the other side of the mall. No Yunha says that's the one behind all this, then tells Bruno to go to the girls, because he's going to put an end to this. Speaking of the girls, they end up surrounded by thugs, who are looking for trouble. They threaten the two and block them from escaping. Soon, Julieta realizes she'll have to fight to survive. Julieta tells No Yuna to hide until things calm down, but the girl says she doesn't want to leave her side. However, one of the thugs says neither of them is going to escape. One of them comes closer, getting right in No Yuna's face, and Julieta tries to push him away, but the other thug lunges at her and knocks from her hand the object she was using as a weapon. The danger for the two only grows when they decide each one will take one of the girls. One of them approaches No Yuna, claiming he won't hurt her at all, but the girl knows that's a lie and tries to run. The thug even manages to grab her hand, but No Yuna uses her powers to push him away. She protects herself by creating a force field. This surprises the thug, as he didn't expect that. Even so, he doesn't give up and tries to cut the force field with a knife, but the blade bends, making him realize the girl is much stronger than he imagined. No Yuna feels relieved, believing this force field will protect her, but to her surprise, the thug manages to break through the barrier and grabs her arm again, saying that this time she's not getting away. Downstairs in the mall, a group of players is carrying out a rescue. However, amid the chaos, they come across a level 8 swamp slime. One of the players rushes in and tries to attack the monster, going against his leader's orders. That was the worst mistake he could make, since the slime grabbed him and devoured him. The team leader tells everyone to fall back, because they can't attack the slime physically. Upstairs, Julieta hides from her pursuer, until she sees that No Yuna has been captured. The girl asks how her defense was destroyed. The enemy simply says he couldn't call himself a player if he couldn't defeat something like that. Then he is attacked with fire but manages to defend himself. Julieta, who threw the flames, tells No Yuna to run. However, while the girl is fleeing from danger, another enemy sneaks up on her. The woman distances herself from the thug and prepares another fire attack. The enemy says she can try as much as she wants, but she won't hit him with that. However, Julieta fires, and this time she manages to break through his shield. Upon being hit, the enemy thinks that suddenly, the wound has gotten stronger. Soon he wonders if she has the gift of amplifying her power. Meanwhile, No Yuna ends up cornered in a toy store. Her pursuer tries to capture her again, but the girl uses her mana to jump as high as she can and throws some toys within reach at the enemy. He kicks the shelf she's on, causing the girl to lose balance and fall toward the ground. The enemy thinks he will now be able to defeat her. However, No Yuna uses her mana once again and dives like a missile. With that, she catches the enemy by surprise, but she can't maintain the energy for long, so she ends up having to back off. No Yuna realizes she needs to attack and not just defend. With that, she fires a mana shot, which hits the enemy directly. After that, No Yuna goes after Julieta. At that moment, the other thug notices that a mere little girl has managed to defeat his partner. He also thinks he can't fight the two of them together, so he'll have to leave. Julieta tells No Yuna not to come closer, but right after, she ends up being bound by mana chains. The enemy surprises her by coming from behind and takes the opportunity to grab and threaten her. No Yuna tries to help, but the enemy says that if she gets closer, her friend will get hurt. The girl is left with her hands tied. Not only that, but the man who was chasing her before returns. He attacks the girl, saying that a player like him could never be defeated by a little girl. No Yuna doesn't like this situation one bit, and she knows she needs to do something, as both their lives are at stake. So she creates a force field again with her mana. Even the enemy is impressed, as she's showing a greater amount of power this time, and if she continues like this, it could trigger a massive explosion. Julieta tries to use this moment to escape, but the villain stabs her with his knife. He tells his partner not to just stand there. At that, the other enemy attacks No Yuna and manages to knock the girl out. After losing consciousness, No Yuna has a vision, where a voice asks if she wants more power, but she remembers her brother telling her not to listen to the voice. No Yunha once said that no matter the situation, she should never listen to that voice because back on the bridge, the girl got lucky. And if she triggered that power again, she might not come back. No Yuna promised her brother she wouldn't accept, but now she knows she'll have to break that promise because there are things she wants to protect too. Therefore, there's a need for more strength to save Julieta. Otherwise, she and her friend might not make it out alive. Before she can accept the deal, a light appears at the end of the tunnel. At the last second, Bruno arrives and lands a solid punch on the thug. The two of them are terrified by his appearance. Before continuing, Bruno takes off his jacket and shields the girl with it, claiming that from now on, he'll take care of everything. The thug who had captured Julieta tries to escape, but Bruno catches up to him first and takes him down with a single blow. While he tries to help the woman recover, the other thug grabs his knife, seeking revenge, and charges at Bruno. But once again, Bruna takes him down with ease. Bruna says that because of the harm they caused the girls, the end for both thugs will be cruel. Days before the incident at the mall, the hooded man went to the thugs' department. Kim Kyung-won says he already did everything the hooded man asked, and now he'll get rid of the child on his own. He tries to attack the mysterious man, but ends up on the losing end. The hooded man says this is a message for Kim's clan, also saying that he'll personally take care of his family. Before leaving, he set everything up to make it look like Kim Kyung-won logged himself out of the server called Life, which is why the news reported it that way. Back in the present, the hooded man goes to the secret warehouse. He finds other thugs there and thinks he needs to finish quickly. However, someone asks who that kid behind him is. The man is startled to see that the protagonist followed him there, and wonders since when he's been tailed. One of the thugs says the boy shouldn't follow strangers, claiming that such a person could harm him. However, the thug is eliminated right in front of his entire group. This leaves everyone furious, and the hooded man warns them not to let their guard down just because he's a kid. In turn, the protagonist asks if a grown man like him is really afraid of a child. With that provocation, they all charge at once, but No Yoonha quickly defeats them all. He's in a hurry since his real interest is in the mysterious man. The man becomes afraid, not understanding how a child could so easily defeat such strong opponents. Even so, he believes it will be different with him, and that he won't lose easily. He attacks the protagonist but fails to land a hit. No Yoonha says that in the end, the mysterious man is nothing special. Irritated, the enemy attacks again, but the protagonist uses it to his advantage. He takes down the mysterious man, but says he won't finish him yet, because he needs to do something first. Sometime later, the authorities have already taken control of the situation, and even Shin Soo-yeon has shown up. The protagonist asks her to handle this situation, promising to repay her someday. Before she deals with the hooded man, he says he's curious to see what the man is hiding behind those glasses, but he's startled by what he sees, saying the man's face is pretty disgusting without them. Then his sister arrives with the adults, and the two finally reunite after all the chaos. News about the incident spreads. A man watches all of it, and upon seeing the adults with the children, says he's finally found him, though not referring to anyone specifically. Either way, Shin Soo-yeon meets the protagonist in a cafe. She says the government has made a decision about the gang that attacked the mall and will put an end to all of them. She also says that President Lee Yoon-hee has returned to the Dawn clan, and the Hares have been sent off to perform social work. After passing on the information, she says goodbye as she needs to leave. The protagonist then thinks that the Dawn clan's future has changed too. Before returning, the three Hares had gone to war over succession, and in the end, the third son took the throne. To young No Yoonha's delight, not only his future, but the entire future is changing. Later, he sits down to have dinner with his family, until this sister reveals in front of everyone that her wish is to become a player. No Yoonha is surprised, as he never imagined his sister's future would go in that direction. He's the first to oppose the decision, saying that kind of work is dangerous. No Yoonha says that decision is hers alone to make, and besides, her own brother knows her potential. The protagonist says he was teaching her to control her mana, so she wouldn't lose control, precisely because he didn't want a dangerous life for her. He claims that being a player isn't as amazing and cool as people think, since it has its exhausting side. However, his sister says her wish is to save people, just like him, because she's tired of seeing others suffer and having no power to do anything about it. Their mother says she supports No Yoonha doing whatever she wants. She says she understands the dangers of being a player, but intends to support her daughter in her decisions. The father also agrees with his daughter's decision. No Yoonha thanks her parents for their support, and the protagonist is the only one left out of it. Elsewhere, a meeting of important executives is taking place. The one in charge says that the attack on the mall was not an isolated incident, but rather a coordinated assault by the Dawn Group. He also says that the president of the group divided the power among his three children, but the youngest has no chance of inheriting the throne, leaving only the other two. Lee Byung-in, the eldest son, is known for having a terrible temper, but being the oldest, he's the most likely to take over leadership. However, the second son, Lee Jung-in, has a good personality and does an excellent job, being the opposite of his brother. Therefore, they believe the eldest is behind the attack, and that could escalate the problems. The one in charge of the meeting says that the mercenaries are not the only ones involved with Lee Byung-in, because he also did business with the Chang'e clan, to everyone's surprise. This indicates that it was through this group that they obtained the magic stones used in the attack. The only problem is that they have no way to prove these claims or hold them responsible for the attack. They also bring up the fact that Shin Soo-yeon discovered Gil Sinong-jun was having an affair with the Harris of the Dangan group and became furious. When ties with the Dangan group were severed, they kept an eye on the Dawn group. They begin to worry about a possible war between groups. While their opponents have the Divine Wind Shin Soo-yeon, they have the Thunder Emperor. However, he's still very young and not ready for a conflict as big as this one. The group is at an impasse because they don't want a war, but they also can't ignore the Chang'e clan. Thus, the subject of the meeting changes, and they need to decide what to do about the Chang'e clan. At this point, the protagonist is in his second year of school, and he's surprised to find himself in the same class as all his friends. At least he feels relieved that Jin Sina is in a different class and hopes he won't have the same problems as before. However, Yoon Hyung catches his captain's attention and asks why those boys are staring at him so much. The protagonist doesn't know yet and prefers to stay quiet, encouraging his friend to do the same. Minji says that everyone already knows what the protagonist's father did to the president of KK Pharmaceuticals, and thanks to that, the whole school is afraid of him. Jin Seon asks if the protagonist is okay with all of this. He replies that he is, but when he looks at Eun Hyunk standing, he notices that he's grown a lot. Eun Hyunk says he's been training a lot and also drinking Haeyang's father's juice. The protagonist remembers the girls also said they were drinking this juice, and realizes that not only has their mana grown, but their bodies as well. So he decides that starting today, he'll drink the juice too. Some time later, their new teacher arrives and introduces himself to his students as Lim Do-hoon. The protagonist immediately notices that the teacher's mana is not normal and becomes suspicious of him. In the principal's office, he asks an employee for a report. His employee reveals that some parents demanded Jin Sina's expulsion, but they managed to handle the situation without issues. He also says that apparently KK Pharmaceuticals tried to get involved with the child connected to that situation, but they resolved it by placing her in the same class as Haeyang. The old man says he will never let anyone ruin his honorary granddaughter's childhood and claims the world would be much better without the Jin family and the pharmaceutical company. In turn, the employee says he's no longer a player for medical reasons, but still wants to be competent for his country. He reveals that he once belonged to the Regulus clan. His name is Lim Do-hoon, and the old man trusts him to carry out such important tasks. Previously, the grandfather asked Haeyang if there was anyone she would like to study with in the second year. She said she'd like to be with all her friends, but her father warned her that it might be difficult. Her grandfather said he would take care of it for her, and when Haeyang returned to school, all her friends would be with her. They have this grandfather-granddaughter relationship, but they are not related by blood. Still, the old man has grown attached to the girl as if she were family and wants to protect her at all costs. Back to the protagonist, he and his sister go to an abandoned warehouse. The two went there to meet Shin Suyeon. Shortly after, Shin Suyeon's winds manifest. She then introduces herself and apologizes for the delay, while the protagonist scolds the woman for being late. His sister is amazed to be in front of someone so famous, which is why she treats her with such formality. But what truly surprises Shin Suyeon is the large amount of mana present in the girl, and she thinks that if others knew about it, they would go crazy after her. Either way, No Yunha asks if she brought what he requested. Shin Suyeong says yes and reveals the magic stone he asked for. No Yunha examines the stone and says it's in good condition. Then he asks if his sister is really okay to continue. She says yes, so No Yunha says he will no longer deny his sister's request. After that, he gives her a sword and says he will first test her skills. The protagonist throws the stone far away and tells No Yunha to act as they trained. When thrown this way, the stone summons a random monster. But this time, a monster called Porori appeared, which doesn't have a grotesque appearance. His sister even thinks it's cute and asks if that's really a monster. The protagonist says yes, and now her duty is to defeat it. In the end, he couldn't convince his sister to give up on this player thing, so he decided to train and support her, just as their parents did. But he's still worried about how terrible this fate can be. Meanwhile, the monster approaches the girl, and she is fascinated by its appearance. Soon No Yunha steps forward and tells her not to lower her guard. The monster that was once cute turns into something horrendous in a matter of seconds, and it only failed to attack the girl because her brother stopped it before it could happen. After that, he tells No Yunha not to judge monsters by appearance, otherwise it could be her end. No Yuna remembers all the times she was saved by someone, and she no longer wants to be protected, as her wish is to be able to defend herself. Besides, she doesn't want to see her brother carry that burden alone and also wants to be the one who protects. Sometime later, No Yuna finally manages to defeat a monster, this after trying 15 times. But now she's exhausted and ends up being supported by her brother. Shin Suyeong watches everything from a distance and thinks that she too had to go through a lot to get where she is. However, seeing the protagonist training his own sister to kill monsters makes him seem like an even scarier child. A few days later, they return to school. The teacher announces that the class representative will distribute some milk cartons to everyone. This makes the protagonist remember something. His acquaintance Hebake Ryan hated drinking plain milk. After these thoughts, Yeon Hyunk approaches and gives him an item that turns milk into chocolate milk. He says he knew about the school milk and stopped by a store beforehand to buy it. The protagonist says they could get in trouble if caught. But Yeon Hyunk says that of all the things he's faced, this shouldn't be something to fear. No Yunha agrees and decides to use the item. However, as soon as he looks at the milk carton, he notices a message about compatriots suffering in Italy, and immediately imagines that it has already begun. After class, he decides to go to his sister's classroom. Even after helping her with training, he felt guilty for making her cry, and he hopes No Yuna isn't feeling too bad. In a moment of distraction, he bumps into an older boy. Irritated, the boy says younger students shouldn't be walking around this floor, but the protagonist scoffs at him, which makes the boy and his friends even more irritated. To No Yunha, this boy seems familiar. Soon after, he realizes that this is actually Lee Kang-hyuk, the player who ruled the Songbuk slums. Even though he wasn't very strong, he had enough intelligence to take advantage of the weak. The protagonist imagines Hyuk probably lived in the slums since he was young, and that would explain his behavior. One of the older boys shoves the protagonist and says he should have more respect. Hyuk lifts No Yunha, claiming he will teach him a good lesson. But upon seeing the protagonist's face, he realizes he feels no fear and looks down on him. That's why he decides to beat No Yunha until he learns some respect. The protagonist was about to fight back, but then he hears a familiar voice. His sister calls Hyuk's attention, making the older boy stop what he was doing, feeling embarrassed. No Yuna showed up just in time and won't let her brother get into trouble. Seeing the way Hyuk acts around No Yuna, the protagonist realizes he is in love with his sister. This fills No Yunha with rage, promising to put an end to the insolent boy. No Yuna approaches and says he shouldn't mess with her brother. Hyuk is shocked to learn they are siblings. His friends are too, saying the two don't even look alike. But the girl stares at them coldly, making Hyuk back off and apologize for what happened. No Yuna holds her brother and walks away from them. All giddy, Hyuk says goodbye to her, leaving the protagonist even more furious. After moving away from the others, the protagonist asks if No Yuna likes the insolent boy, but she replies that she doesn't like anyone other than her younger brother, and says that now she will walk into his classroom. A few days earlier, their grandmother was walking to her house. She sees a picture of them and thinks they'd grown a lot. However, on her way home, the old lady hears a noise coming from a dark alley, and as she gets closer, she sees a child sleeping in a trash can. She feels sorry for the child, imagining he's been through a lot, because when she touches the street boy, she realizes he's cold from the weather. The boy reveals himself to be a demi-human. When touched, he remembers his horrible past, and moves away from the old woman because he doesn't trust other people. In an attempt to run away, he ends up falling, and tells the lady not to come near him. The old woman tries to approach, but since the boy isn't used to acts of kindness, he thinks he's in danger. However, she simply covers him with her umbrella and invites him to spend the rest of the night at her house. Back in the present, Grandma welcomes her family for a visit, and is happy to see the children have grown. She looks at her daughter and says that living in the city has done her well, because even after giving birth to 3 children, she still looks the same. The youngest daughter is puzzled by Grandma's presence, but the lady says they met last year, and maybe the little one doesn't remember. Then she asks how old the girl is. She answers with her hands that she's 3 years old. Grandma then says they must be hungry, and invites them to come in right away. But before that, the protagonist senses a strange presence, and warns his older sister. No Yunha figures it could be a thief or a monster, so she needs to deal with it before their grandmother is in danger. When he slightly opens the door, he notices that the figure doesn't seem very big, so he opens the door and goes on the attack. Outside, the adults hear shouting. As they approach, they come across the commotion. No Yunha wonders how the boy got in there, and confronts him, asking who he is. After things calm down, the adults stop to talk and say that Grandma should have told them about the boy. She says she was waiting for them to arrive to talk about it. Meanwhile, the protagonist recognizes the boy as Lee Hyun because he had met his older version before returning. No Yunha hopes they can be friends again, like in his past life, but he notices the boy is quite different from the version he knows. In turn, Lee Hyun asks why the protagonist is staring at him so much. He yells, saying he won't share his food, and Grandma tells him not to yell like that. Lee Hyun calls her old hag and says he doesn't like being stared at. The protagonist doesn't like the way his grandmother is treated and thinks that Lee Hyun wasn't this crazy when he met him. He thinks he'll have to train him, so he invites Lee Hyun to play outside. Lee Hyun says he's still eating. No Yuna says she wants to go too, but her brother tells her she's still eating. Then he grabs Lee Hyun by the clothes and says it's better for him to go outside before things get worse. After that, the protagonist throws him to the ground. Lee Hyun gets angry at this, because when he fell, he accidentally dropped the chicken from his hand, and claims you shouldn't hit someone who's eating. No Yunha, however, says he's not a person, but a dog. He creates a soundproof mana barrier so they can talk without being overheard. Then he says Hun's behavior is not human at all, claiming that he's going to teach him how to behave, so the protagonist goes at him and hits the boy with a soda bottle. Lee Han doesn't understand why he's being beaten, but the protagonist says it's because he's eating and sleeping at the expense of the one who took him off the streets. And on top of that, he treats an elderly lady like some mere old hag, when in fact he should be showing more respect. Hyun yells for help, but the protagonist says no one will hear him. He also says that if Hyun could use telepathy, he could ask for help. However, Lee Hyun says he's just a 10-year-old boy and couldn't possibly do something like that. With that, the protagonist thinks it was a lie when the old Lee Hyun claimed he had been a telepath since childhood. So since it was a lie, he figures he should hit him even more. The next day, tempers had cooled a bit. Lee Hyun stands in front of everyone and wonders how a boy younger than him managed to beat him so violently. The protagonist's parents say that a 10-year-old should be in the 3rd year of elementary school, yet he doesn't seem to have been properly educated. Upon hearing that, Lee Hyun mutters that he doesn't want to go to school, but when he sees the look the protagonist gives him at that attitude, he changes his stance and says he doesn't like school because he was always bullied there. No Yoonha suggests that instead, Hyun should join the 2nd year with him. The boy doesn't like the idea, but in an intimidating tone, No Yoonha tells him to just accept it. So, unwillingly, Lee Hyun had to accept the invitation. The adults say that after just one night of playing together, the two have become best friends. But Lee Hyun panics, knowing very well that isn't the case. After that, the protagonist drags Lee Hyun outside and says they can play a little more. Far from there, a meeting takes place among people connected to the 12 monarchs. Among them is the goddess of South Korea, Lim Ga-yul, and the Italian ambassadors, Albert Valentine and Zenko Marin. They are negotiating the return of some Koreans from Italy to their home country, but for that, they must defeat the monster surrounding the Atlantic Ocean. Lim Ga-yul says sending players for that mission is difficult, and asks why they don't send players from Southern Europe instead. Albert says Koreans have great options that provide good effects and don't require piercing the body to consume. Therefore, he wants to negotiate an exchange between these potions and the mana alloys in the Mediterranean Sea. As far as the fairy knows, that is an essential item for the Italians. Irritated, Zenko feels at a disadvantage and says this trade doesn't make sense. He further states that if the fairy wants all the Koreans trapped in Italy back, she must help in the fight against the ocean monster. But then he asks if the goddess refuses to help because Korean players aren't strong enough. His own companion warns him to stop provoking her. Even so, he continues with the insult, until the fairy says the man's words cause nothing but disgust. Immediately, a dark aura fills the place, and the two Italian ambassadors begin to feel its effects on their bodies. The fairy says that for the well-being of all Koreans in Italy, she will grant the help they need. She says this power comes from the so-called Shinchang, using Nambang's nebula, and that members of the monarchs will help. After saying that, she stops using her power and releases the two men from its effects. Albert says it's not good to seal a deal like this, believing it's not very diplomatic. But the fairy says if he didn't like it, he should write a letter of complaint, and she'll personally deliver it straight to the international organization, since she's one of the ambassadors. Dissatisfied and feeling humiliated, Zenko Marin claims he'll kill her. However, an ally of the fairy says if Zenko takes one more step, he won't live to tell the tale. Before leaving, the fairy says she is not acting without thinking. And with that, she ends the conversation and leaves the place, leaving the two with nothing to show for it. At the Blue House office, some bodyguards discuss the foreigner's behavior. Park Sang praises Lim Ga-yul's performance, saying she's not just a mere actress, has she truly proved to be a powerful fairy. Lim Ga-yul asks if he's getting that opinion as the fairy's bodyguard or as the actress's manager. The other bodyguard, named Lee Jung-hyun, says his colleague doesn't know how to compliment a woman. However, the fairy says the same goes for him. Lee Jung-hyun says the foreigners brought a Maserati Gran Turismo as a gift, and he heard that Big Mama personally chose it for the fairy, imagining the vehicle would be comfortable enough for her. However, his boss tells him to return the car. The fairy thinks she has never seen Big Mama in person, but knows her personality isn't that friendly, and she figures Big Mama always has reasons for what she does and is probably underestimating them. Then, Lim Ga-yul orders her bodyguard to place trusted people to keep an eye on the Italian ambassadors. Park says he's happy for her because everything went better than expected. Lim Ga-yul says this was thanks to Alice Pharmaceuticals, and that as soon as they're done with the Italians, they should express gratitude to them. Her manager says provoking foreigners was risky, but she replies that Shin-chang was in the room next door. If the problem had escalated, he would have handled the ambassadors instead of her. Speaking of Italians, Giulietta walks down the street super happy. She has just left the hospital and received the news that she's pregnant, so she decides to call her husband to share the news. However, she thinks it's better to tell him in person and simply invites him to lunch. The woman thinks it'll be better to deliver the news while looking into his eyes. But her moment of joy ends when someone asks if she's Giulietta Valentine. Zenko Marin approaches her in the middle of the street and introduces himself. He says Giulietta is even more beautiful now. He also says she should feel guilty, and as he grabs her, he says it's time for the little bird to return to the cage. Sometime later, Bruno's phone rings again, and he wonders why his wife is calling him again. When he answers, Julieta thanks Bruno for everything they've had so far, but tells him not to look for her anymore. Obviously, Bruno becomes very worried and tries to understand the situation. However, Julieta hangs up, and Zenko Marin praises her performance, saying that she should leave behind the people she loves. Back to the protagonist, he comes out of a convenience store with his friends. Haeyang invites everyone to hang out, and he says he'll drop his backpack at home first. But on the way, he spots Julieta being escorted to a car. Next to her, he recognizes the man as Zenko Marin and wonders what he's doing there. Thinking about it, he concludes there must have been a diplomatic meeting between Korea and Italy, since he remembers the milk carton. He also knows about the Leviathan that surpassed rank 2 in his past life. Since this event already happened once, the protagonist knows that Shin-Chang was the only Korean warrior who returned from the hunt, and even then, he was badly injured. The player known as Machine Gun suffered permanent mental damage due to the side effects of mana depletion. The florist, on the other hand, was declared dead, but in reality, she was captured and imprisoned in Italy, and the one responsible was none other than Zenko Marin. Accusations against Italy came from several countries, including South Korea, and in the end, Big Mama publicly put an end to the criminal Zenko Marin. Knowing this, the protagonist decides to follow the criminal and tells his friend not to follow him. He thinks he'll find out what's going on and then call Bruno. After that, No Yunha runs like never before, but after he turns the corner, the car stops. The Italians suspected someone was following them, but are surprised to see it's just a boy. Zenko Marin approaches and slaps the protagonist. No Yunha defends himself, and Zenko wonders since when kids can control mana like that. Then he says there's no choice but to get rid of this boy. The protagonist dodges and realizes the criminal isn't playing around. He understands he'll have to fight for real. However, it becomes harder and harder to dodge, so he decides to counterattack. But his opponent is strong and manages to defend himself. Zenko thinks that for a kid, he's pretty strong. Even so, he's still a child. Using his speed, he manages to get close to the protagonist without him noticing, and grabs the boy by the neck. No Yunha thinks he'll end up dying if this keeps up, and that he needs to get rid of the enemy immediately. In the middle of this, Julieta gets out of the car and yells at Zenko to leave the boy alone. She says the villain promised he wouldn't go after any of her acquaintances. Zenko is surprised to find out they know each other. Even so, Julieta begs him to let the boy go. However, Zenko says the protagonist isn't a normal boy. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done what he did. Albert steps in and tells Zenko to do as Julieta says, so he obeys and releases the protagonist. Julieta goes to him and thanks him for trying to help, but says No Yunha doesn't need to worry about her. She takes the ring off her finger and asks him to deliver it to Bruno, saying she's sorry. She also asks the protagonist to tell him that she was very happy by her husband's side. Seeing Julieta being taken away again, No Yunha tries to stop it, but the enemy throws him far away and tells him not to meddle in his affairs again. Lying among the trash, No Yunha reflects on life and thinks that in this life things would be different. He wanted to be able to save his family and friends, and he also thought he would avoid all the disasters of his past life since he had the advantage of knowing the future. But in situations like this, he rethinks his beliefs, concluding that he does not want the same life as before. Therefore, he will do whatever is necessary to have his long-dreamed happiness, and that includes the happiness of the people around him as well. Elsewhere, Jang Seo-kun is working on some potions, but he is extremely tired as he had to stay up for nights on end to meet the demand requested by the government. Until suddenly, his phone rings and he answers. On the other end, the protagonist says he needs to ask a favor. Near the abandoned warehouse, No Yuna trains with Shin Chueon. The Divine Wind uses her powers to test the girl's reflexes, and says she's doing very well, so she decides to act with a bit more intensity. The girl immediately loses her balance, which makes Shin Sueyoung think she doesn't know how to handle magical powers. But to her surprise, No Yuna manages to escape the magical typhoon and asks why she suddenly increased the intensity. The woman says that in a real scenario, you never know what will happen, so she needs to practice dealing with unexpected situations. Then Shin Sueyoung ends the typhoon, and the girl is left suspended on a mana platform, only for Shin Sueyoung to make No Yuna fall from the platform. And to avoid getting hurt, No Yuna creates a mana jelly to soften the fall. She then charges forward right after. Shin Sueyoung praises her performance but doesn't go easy on her, throwing projectiles in her direction. No Yuna once again shields herself with the mana jelly. The Divine Wind notices the girl is intelligent in combat and getting better and better, but she still needs a bit more training. After being captured, No Yuna gives up, and Shin Sueyoung says that even so, she has improved a lot in 3 months, and finding a way to get out of that situation on her own is also a form of learning. However, Shin Sueyoung receives a call from the protagonist, something rare, so she assumes it must be something serious. In another scene, we see Bruno preparing for combat. He takes all the weapons he has stored. After that, he checks his physique in the mirror and thinks his muscles have shrunk a bit, so he no longer looks like the Bear of Valentine. A flashback shows that in the past, Bruno acted as a bodyguard, specifically for Giulietta, the Princess of Valentine. He always protected her from abusive men, and because of that, she nicknamed him the Bear of Valentine. But he was always embarrassed to be called that in public. At one point, Giulietta attended a meeting in which it was revealed that Big Mama had chosen Myron as governor of Sicily. None of those present liked this news. However, the head of the Valentine family announced that their family would also ally with Myron. Giulietta disagreed with her father and was supported by some. However, her father stuck to his decision, claiming it was for her own safety and also temporary. And to prove his alliance with Myron, he decided to give his daughter's hand in marriage to him. Giulietta didn't like it at all, as Vicent Myron is a playboy hare and a complete lunatic. Even so, her father tried to convince her to marry Myron and have a child with him. That way, she would receive an amplifier as a gift to increase her mana, and it would also affect her child. Her father claimed that with such a child, they would have an advantage over the Myron family, and would use that to restore the glory of the Valentine family. Giulietta was always assigned to do what she didn't want, under the justification that it was for the good of her family. Even though they were shocked by the patriarch's decision, the others were forced to support him, and they tried to convince the princess to agree to it. Even her own brother didn't have the courage to defend her, and preferred to remain silent in the face of their father's decision. With that, Giulietta had no choice but to accept. Bruno, her loyal protector, knew that wasn't what she wanted. Later, he confronted her. Eventually, Giulietta confessed that she only accepted the arrangement to please her father, but she didn't want to be treated like an object or give birth to a Myron child. That way, Bruno promised that even if he had to become the enemy of the entire world, he would protect her, and he invited her to run away with him. That's how the two ended up in South Korea. Back in the present, Bruno looks at the tracking device he secretly implanted in her. He wants, at all costs, to keep his promise to protect her. But as soon as he leaves home to go after his beloved, he runs into the protagonist who was waiting for him. No Yunha says he's not going to let him handle this task alone. On the way, Bruno thinks the protagonist is better than many players, but he doesn't want to risk putting him in danger. He tries to convince the boy not to go, but No Yunha insists and says he won't sit out this mission. So Bruno accepts it and says that, fortunately, Giulietta still has her phone turned on. The protagonist sees that her location is at the Alice Hotel and says he already knows the building. Bruno says it would be better for No Yunha to wear armor, but he says he doesn't have any in his size and decides that would limit his movements. They are practically preparing for a war, yet the protagonist shows no concern, which surprises Bruno. Either way, No Yunha says he still has Giulietta's ring. Before, he didn't know, but now he realizes that the wedding ring is actually a mana amplifier, and that will be very useful. The protagonist remembers that the European Union's attack against the Abyssal was a success. Many people around the world thought it would be impossible, but the honored warriors managed to complete the mission. However, players started an argument when the attack ended because the content of the report was disgusting. Many on the team were Italians from the Myron family, including some who were children of Giulietta, who was used as a tool, nicknamed the Mother of Players. No Yunha thinks that Bruno probably died in his past life trying to prevent this from happening. Sometime later, they arrive at the hotel entrance. Right away, some security guards notice the strange movement and approach them, but our heroes quickly take care of the threat. Inside the building, Zenko Marin asks why they had to change hotels all of a sudden. He finds it strange that a hotel booked weeks in advance would have a problem on the exact day of the reservation. Giulietta provokes him, saying that some establishments don't accept bookings from jerks like him. Snapping back at her, Zenko Marin says they didn't expect to find her in Korea, but by luck, they saw her on TV on the day of the mall incident. Unfazed, Giulietta says she's impressed they needed several men to capture a single woman. This irritates Zenko Marin, and he says Giulietta is lucky to be under the Myron's watch. Otherwise, he would finish her right there. In turn, Giulietta pushes him away with spit to the face. Zenko Marin then tries to retaliate with a slap, but Albert Valentine stops him and protects his sister. After that, Zenko decides to go out for some fresh air. Giulietta takes the opportunity to ask her brother to buy her a snack since she hasn't eaten in a while. Tom Myron suggests ordering room service, but Albert says he should go to the store because that's what his sister asked for. Before leaving, Tom says Albert is no longer a Valentine but a Myron. Irritated, the man says he knows that very well and doesn't need to be reminded constantly. That way, the siblings are left alone in the room. Giulietta says Albert is still the same idiot as always. She stands up and says she can't stand being in front of him. In the bathroom, Giulietta has some time to think alone. Remembering Bruno's promise, she can't hold back, and sheds a few tears of sadness. Nearby, Zenko is also in the bathroom, until suddenly he notices someone approaching. No Yunha comes in already attacking with his sword, and catches the enemy off guard. Zenko gets irritated to see the same boy again. In turn, the protagonist says he should pull up his pants before saying anything. 1 hour before the hotel invasion, the protagonist had asked Shin Suyeon to bless him with magic that increases the speed and strength of his movements. No Yunha warned that there could be civilians in the hotel, and they might get caught in the crossfire. However, Shin Suyeon informed him that the fairy government had already ordered the place evacuated, so with that and Mr. Jung's potions, he was more than prepared. Back to the fight, the protagonist thinks his best chance is now since his enemy is unarmed and has little room to move. Right after, Zenko attacks but ends up hitting the wall. No Yunha is sharper now. He learned from their last fight and prepared well. When counterattacked, Zenko realizes the boy is much stronger than before, as he even managed to break his mana barrier. The protagonist attacks again and tells the enemy not to just stand there. He throws Zenko to the other side of the bathroom. The enemy thinks he can't fight properly due to the cramped space, so he manages to distract the protagonist just enough to run out the bathroom door. No Yunha realizes he was naive, because of course a coward would run the moment he thought he might lose. During his escape, Zenko fires, claiming he won't lose to a child. The protagonist knows he doesn't have much time, as the potion's effect is almost over. Zenko sees the boy drinking another healing potion and notices it's the same one the fairy used during the meeting. He quickly concludes that he should have defeated him when he had the chance. He thinks he can't fight without a weapon, so he goes to look for one. No Yunha runs after the enemy, but as soon as he gets close, a knife is thrown at him. Kitchen knives were the only items Zenko could find, and with that, he intends to face the protagonist. The two resume fighting intensely, until Zenko notices the boy's strength is wearing out. He takes the opportunity to restrain No Yuna. The enemy claims that without his potions, the boy is nothing. However, the protagonist activates a skill called Spirit of Vengeance. Zenko realizes this is a mana-draining skill and backs away, but the protagonist charges at him with hyper speed. He strikes the enemy with all his strength, yet Zenko only defends, knowing the effect of the attacks is temporary. Their fight is so intense it leaves the surrounding area heavily damaged. After a while, Zenko asks where all that confidence will go once the potion's effect ends. Such provocation doesn't please the protagonist at all. Back in the room, Albert tries to convince his sister that what they're doing is for the good of their family. But since his words are ignored, he decides to go out for a walk. Outside, he tries to clear his mind, until, out of nowhere, Bruno appears and asks where Giulietta is. Albert says Bruno made a big mistake by taking Giulietta from home, but he'll give him a chance to make amends. He then says Bruno can return to Italy and work for his family again. But Bruno isn't interested in talking and immediately charges forward. Albert doesn't back down and says that if that's the case, he'll fight. Back with the protagonist, he drinks another potion and tells the enemy his supply isn't over yet. Extremely irritated, Zenko attacks. But this time, he intensifies his assault, claiming that a mere power-enhancing potion won't make the boy win. He summons some mana hounds and attacks the protagonist. While defending himself, No Yunha thinks he can't waste time, so he also intensifies his attacks and defeats the hounds, then charges straight toward the enemy. Zenko defends himself, saying today won't be the day he dies. He also says he has the advantage of being in his own territory. Zenko's main specialty is being a marksman, so he fires magic arrows at the boy and says there's no way to dodge them. No Yunha is hit by a few arrows, but that's not enough to disable him. However, the enemy doesn't stop attacking. Once again, he uses the hounds to pin down the protagonist's leg, and along with that, delivers an attack from above. No Yunha thinks there's no way to dodge, so his strategy is to unleash a bigger attack. After that, he tries to break free from the hounds, and immediately charges at Zenko. Desperate, the enemy pushes him back, and tries to use magic traps to stop the protagonist from continuing the fight. The protagonist ends up stepping on magic mines, and a huge explosion follows. As he steps back, he thinks he needs to recover, but Zenko surprises him and stops him from using the potion. The enemy takes the boy's potion and uses it on himself. Right after, he attacks, preventing the protagonist from escaping. Zenko once again sets up some explosive mines and throws the protagonist toward them. This causes more explosions, and Zenko celebrates as if he's already won. However, he looks closely at the smoke from the blast. Seeing that through it, a silhouette is approaching. The protagonist emerges, saying they should finish this now. Irritated, Zenko asks how many potions he still has. He finds the boy's recovery speed impressive, and his mana also seems greater than before. No Yunha says that in the end, he didn't just have potions, he also had an important item. Zenko sees the power amplification ring, and wonders how much stronger this boy can still get. However, he thinks he can still win, since he has the advantage of being an excellent marksman, and says that when it comes to using a weapon, there's no one faster than him. But contrary to his expectations, the protagonist doesn't shoot and opts for a melee attack instead. Zenko is caught off guard and ends up losing an arm. No Yunha says he's not the one who needs to learn a lesson, pointing out Zenko as a dog that needs to be trained. Meanwhile, a fight is taking place in the hotel corridors. Bruno attacks with the full force of a wild beast, even managing to destroy much of the surrounding scenery. Because of that, Albert chooses to attack from a distance and fires several shots while running. When he thought he had escaped, Bruno surprises him and appears at his back. However, Albert says that Bruno's abilities used to be stronger before, and now he's disappointed because he expected more from him. Albert fires a point-blank shot at Bruno, but to his surprise, nothing happens because Bruno used a force field to block the shot. After that, he attacks Albert once again. However, his opponent claims there are two reasons why Bruno lost. First, attacks that have a pattern are no longer in style. Second, relying on potions for magic enhancement is a weakness, because as the potion's effect fades, the player loses their strength. Bruno defends himself, but realizes he won't hold out for long, until suddenly, Julieta appears and tells them both to stop fighting. She says the deal was to go with them in exchange for not touching anyone around her. Her brother, however, reminds her that in the first place, she was the one who broke a promise when she fled Italy and abandoned her commitment to the family. Therefore, he states he'll finish this quickly so they can both return home. Julieta then points his gun at her own head and says her brother can do as he pleases. Only instead, he points another gun at Bruno and tells him to leave or else he'll die. Julieta agrees and says it's not just her brother in the building, and even if he defeats him, he won't be able to beat them all. In turn, Bruno remembers he promised to always be by her side, so he can't give up. Albert tries to catch him off guard and fires a shot. But to everyone's surprise, Bruno stops the projectile in midair. He says that even if the whole world turns against him, he will always protect her from any danger. Then he attacks his opponent with fire, forcing Albert to move away from his sister and defend himself. Bruno looks at Julieta and asks what she really wants. The woman then extends her hand and asks him to save her, granting him a power boost. Back to the protagonist, he says the enemy's severed arm is still intact, and he could still manage to reattach it with healing magic. But to prevent that from happening, No Yunha crushes the severed limb, sending his enemy into despair. Zenko becomes furious about this, and activates a magic called Detonator. No Yunha asks if that isn't a magic that blows up everything around it. He thinks he needs to get out of the blast radius to avoid being hit, but then realizes the enemy is chasing him using his own mana. Because of this, No Yunha ends up being hit and his escape is thwarted. Not only that, but he notices arrows coming his way, much stronger than the previous ones. His only option is to attack them before they hit him. However, along with the arrows, Zenko approaches. The protagonist tries to attack him and defeat his opponent once and for all, but he ends up failing, because his child's body has its limitations, and that allowed the enemy to create an opening to counterattack. Thus, Zenko uses one of his tricks and manages to trap the boy in a magic cage. The protagonist tries to escape, knowing he needs to finish this before his body weakens again. But instead of breaking the cage, he actually breaks his sword. This leaves him vulnerable, and Zenko takes the chance to attack. No Yunha once again uses his mana abduction ability to try to recover. Zenko becomes desperate as he has already lost an arm and can't lower his guard again, so he ends up moving away from the boy. No Yunha even tried to attack, but his body no longer responds like before. His enemy sees this as an advantage, and attacks with full force. As best he can, No Yunha defends himself, but he no longer has the same drive as before. That's why Zenko manages to capture him once again, and incapacitates the boy from continuing to fight. On the ground, No Yunha takes a real beating. This time the enemy truly wants to kill him. After hitting him so much, Zenko prepares to deliver the final blow. He fires several arrows toward the protagonist, and once again celebrates victory, thinking there's no way anyone could escape this attack. But to be sure, he moves closer to attack again. However, the protagonist pulls him in through the smoke, and bites Zenko's only good arm. He pushes the boy away, irritated that he didn't die, saying he should have killed him the first time. But before he could do anything, Zenko feels something different. He can no longer control his mana, and falls to the ground as he's losing control over his own body. The enemy doesn't understand how this is possible, until No Yunha presents the poison he used. He says it's called the Dark Spider's Bite, which causes the target's mana to combust until death. Zenko is surprised the boy was hiding this until now. Even so, he claims that both will die in the explosion. But No Yunha says he's not an idiot and prepared for this. He has an antidote, so he won't be affected by the poison. After that, No Yunha points a gun at the enemy's head. Zenko panics, claiming the boy will regret this because killing him will cause an international problem for Korea. In turn, the protagonist says the worth of the enemy's death will be decided by those still alive, and he shouldn't worry about it since he's lost and will soon die. After that, No Yunha finishes the job. He sees there's only one potion left, so he should drink it and go meet Bruno. Nearby, Tom Myron witnessed everything, and wonders how someone like Zenko lost to a mere boy. He knows he can't do anything about it, so he figures it's best to try to buy time before being confronted by Korean players who should be close to arriving. Now getting Julieta out of there is his priority. Speaking of Julieta, her brother and husband are still fighting. Bruno is much stronger due to the power boost she gave him, until someone interrupts the fight. Tom Myron says that if they want to see Julieta alive, they'd better stop right now. He tells Bruno to stand still and raise his hands because he's not bluffing. Bruno then obeys the order. Tom tells Albert to let him go because Zenko is dead and they're out of time. Albert, in turn, fires a shot, hitting Tom right in the head. Julieta doesn't understand why her brother did that. However, Albert claims he's been wanting to do that for a while now, and regrets that someone else eliminated Zenko in his place. He says he did it to erase any trace of the Myron family in Korea, but now that the two are dead, he tries to convince Julieta and Bruno to return to Italy, because this is their best chance to destroy the entire Myron family and restore the honor of the Valentines. However, Julieta says the Myron family won't let the death of their own go unanswered, and imagines that the burden of being the Valentine family's successor must have driven her brother insane. She thinks her brother is not the same as before. Albert points his gun at Bruno, telling him to remember the happy life he had in Italy, trying to use that to convince him to go back with Julieta. But right after, something catches his attention. The protagonist arrives, claiming that Albert cannot take the two out of Korea. He is wounded in the leg, but manages to dodge a worse attack. After that, he tries to counterattack the boy, but No Yunha ends up stabbing the enemy's leg with his knife. Albert resorts to firing his gun, and manages to hit the boy in the leg. After moving away, he thinks this fight is a waste of time, so he'll have to kill Bruno and take his sister back. But then, Julieta reaches Bruno and boosts his power again. No Yunha was only buying time for her to do that, and tells him not to leave Korea. Julieta thanks him for the help and says she'll never leave. Right after, she unleashes a massive power boost, leaving her brother extremely desperate. After that, she tells Bruno to return alive. He then charges forward, much stronger than before. Albert tries to flee, but his leg injury hinders his movement. That way, even defending with a shield, he's hit head-on, being thrown against the wall. Not satisfied, Bruno attacks again. In a desperate attempt, Albert fires like a madman, but it's no use. Bruno finds himself face to face with him, and with a single punch, he sends Albert crashing through the hotel wall. The wall leads directly outside, into a massive fall. Albert Valentine's whole life flashes before his eyes, but he thinks that dying like this would be far too humiliating. When he hits the ground, he gets seriously injured, yet he still manages to survive and crawls out of the hole. He imagines that, having survived, he could escape and return with reinforcements. However, he suddenly feels the wind growing stronger and doesn't understand why. Shin Soo-young stands in front of Albert and says he is being arrested for all his reckless actions on Korean soil. Some time later, in the underground storage of the Blue House, Lim Ga-yul faces Albert and says the tables have turned. Now he's the one being subdued. In his defense, Albert claims he is innocent of all charges and insists that an ambassador like him cannot be held prisoner. However, Lim Ga-yul states they have a video of Albert shooting Tom Myron. There's also the fact that he was an accomplice to Zenko Myron in his crimes on Korean soil. On top of that, he mistreated an elementary school child, and all this is more than enough to keep him detained. She also says they analyzed the information about Big Mama and Italy and discovered that from the beginning, he planned to get rid of the Myrons in Korea. Not to mention that other Italians were with him in the hotel, and they all confessed their crimes. Realizing he has no way out, Albert finds himself cornered and asks what Lim Ga-yul wants from him. She says that a lie told many times becomes the truth, so there are many things she wants. Far from there, at the city hospital, the protagonist gets scolded by his mother for getting into trouble again. She says that over the past 3 months, he's been crossing the line and she doesn't want it to keep happening. After they talk, she leaves, saying she'll be back soon. No Yunha wonders if his father and sister will visit them too, because he doesn't want them to worry. He decides to turn on the TV and sees that the incident is being reported. The reporter says the chaos was caused by an unexpected dungeon, and that the Italian ambassador, Albert Valentine, was declared dead. The protagonist knows that's a lie and quickly suspects some sort of secret agreement took place behind the scenes. Soon after, Julieta and Bruno arrive to visit him. The woman calls him a hero and brings some food as a gift. Then, the couple bows before the protagonist, thanking him for what he did, as otherwise they would have met a terrible fate. No Yunha isn't used to so much formality and says they don't have to do that. Even so, they swear eternal loyalty to No Yunha, claiming they owe their lives to him and will protect him forever as repayment. They call him the boss of the galaxies and even consider raising their child to become the protagonist's assistant in the future. No Yunha gets extremely flustered and thinks that he has no intention of becoming a player in this life, so he won't need that much support. But he's shocked by the mention of a child. Julieta apologizes for not saying it earlier, but reveals that she's pregnant. She also has something else to share. She shows the protagonist their new Korean identities. She says that from now on, they'll live under new surnames to begin a new life in South Korea. However, they chose the same surname as No Yunha, and because of that, he is left stunned. Even so, the couple says that from now on, they're part of the same family. Some time later, in the old man's library, Bruno visits him and thanks him for covering up the information about him and Giulietta. He knows they entered Korea without documents, and without the old man's help, they wouldn't have their new identities. The old man says he didn't do anything special. He explains that the fairy was curious about them, so he did what he could to hide them. He also says that in the end, he came out ahead because due to the incident, the partnership between Hotel Alice and the Dawn and I groups will be discontinued. But he warns Bruno to be careful because even though the fairy said she wouldn't investigate them, he doesn't fully trust that. Knowing Bruno is unemployed, he invites him to become an exclusive player. The old man says the protection isn't for him, it's for his granddaughter and her friends. Bruno realizes the old man is a good person and accepts the offer to protect the children he loves. After being left alone, the old man thinks that along with old age, he's also grown more sentimental, and he even remembers his wife. Time passes, and the day of the mission against the ocean creature finally arrives. As a warship approaches the area, some players become frightened because the monster is getting close. The creature rises and shakes the ship. The Leviathan is a powerful monster, ranked number 2 overall, which is why many fear it. But unlike most, one of the players doesn't hesitate and attacks the monster. He's Namgong Sungwon, better known as the Divine Spear, and he asks for room to operate. He says he'll clear the way for the others. Sungwon freezes the creature and takes the opportunity to move in, but his ice doesn't hold the monster for long. Even so, he doesn't stop fighting. He uses one of his skills called Frozen Plum Blossom Chain. Along with that, he also attacks with a magic spear that allows him to manipulate ice. That way, the Divine Spear charges at the Leviathan. Sometime later, the protagonist sees the news of the player's victory over the monster, and he notes that the future he knows hasn't changed much. Alongside that, he knows Sungwon will retire from the 12 monarchs soon. He's walking with his family, until his 4-year-old sister, No Yune, asks to play with him. He and his family are in front of the secondary academy because of his older sister, who is there to take her entrance exams. But No Yune takes a while to come out, and her brother soon starts to worry. A few hours earlier, all the participants were being evaluated. This isn't a test to assess the candidates' gifts, but rather to determine who has what it takes to become a player. The head supervisor watches everything closely and asks to take a better look at the last 2 cameras. One of the applicants notices the supervisor is interested in participant Ryu Yanhwa and says she has the highest mana reading. She was recognized as a seed even when she was a child. However, the supervisor asks the name of participant 39. One of them says her name is No Yuna. Upon seeing how she performs in the test, all attention automatically turns to No Yuna and the seed, until someone notices that neither of them is using mana. They're taking the test relying solely on their physical abilities. The Divine Wind advised No Yuna to only use mana during the test in case of extreme urgency. No Yuna didn't understand why. Then Shin Suoyong explained that players often find themselves in disadvantageous situations, so they need to learn how to deal with that from the very beginning. The girl realizes her mentor was right. However, she wasn't the only one not using mana, and she notices the other girl was faster than her. Soon, No Yuna approaches the other girl to praise her performance. In response, Ryu Yanhwa simply turns her back and leaves her talking to herself. Then, an instructor announces he will explain the final stage. He says that behind this door is a labyrinth. Its structure changes constantly, and everyone will start at a random point. Inside, there will be resting areas where participants can take a break if needed, and they can even form teams if they want. After the explanation, a girl approaches No Yuna. She introduces herself as Choi Hiji. She says she's very skilled at using mana and invites No Yuna to join her group. Even knowing that each person starts in a different location, Choi says they can still help each other inside and promises she has no bad intentions. Ryu Yanhwa is also invited, but she says she doesn't need help. Unlike No Yuna, the other girls don't like being rejected and start speaking ill of Ryu. No Yuna tries to calm things down and thinks that under other circumstances, it would be difficult to get close to those girls. On the other hand, she believes it would be great to become friends with Ryu Yanhwa. Then, the instructor gets everyone's attention and warns that the final test is about to begin. After everyone enters the labyrinth, No Yuna feels a bit lost and doesn't know which way to go. Then she remembers her mentor's lessons. Shin Sueong taught her that the first thing to do when lost is to understand the flow of mana. No Yuna then analyzes the mana in the area, and she thinks that following the flow might lead her to the exit of the labyrinth. But along the way, she comes across a resting room, and one of the instructors says she's the first to arrive. The instructor offers her water and also a hint. No Yuna accepts the water but asks if giving hints is allowed. He replies that since this is the final stage, it is indeed permitted. Then she points her in the right direction. No Yuna thanks her and runs in the indicated direction. However, she realizes she can't feel the flow of mana in that direction and starts to suspect she was deceived. But then she sees an instructor nearby and figures that must be the right place after all. Choi Hee-ji sees her and says they're asking the teacher which way to go. The teacher says the sun rises in the east, so that's the direction they should head. Excited, the kids follow the direction given. But No Yuna still feels that something is off, because the mana flow is actually going in the opposite direction. She keeps walking with the other children, and the teachers continue to point them the wrong way. Eventually, she reaches the end of a fork in the road, close to a table with food. The teacher says he can't reveal the final path, but he's just pretending to be strict, and then points the direction to the children. However, No Yuna finally speaks up, and says the path to the exit is actually in the other direction, because the mana flow is heading the opposite way from where they're going. The children say the teacher showed them the way and couldn't be lying, so they believe No Yuna is trying to sabotage them because she wants to reach the final by herself. Even Choi Hee-ji says No Yuna might be mistaken and tells her not to think she knows more than the teachers. This causes No Yuna to start doubting her own judgment, until she wonders what her brother would say in this situation. Then she remembers him telling her to never trust anyone because as a player, she should rely on her instincts. So she sticks to her claim and points toward the opposite path as the real exit. However, Choi Hee-ji says she can go alone if she wants, because the rest of them will keep going the way they are. So No Yuna starts running in the opposite direction, going against everyone's decision. Choi Hee-ji doesn't understand what's gotten into her, since the exit is right in front of them, yet the girl decided to run the other way. But as soon as she ran through the exit, she ended up being teleported to the middle of the maze again. Unlike her, No Yuna managed to reach the exit by trusting her intuition. She finished late and knows her family is waiting for her, so she just wants to drink some water and leave. That's when Reincarnation shows up with a bottle of soda and offers her one, saying the vending machine accidentally dropped too. She also says that she rejected the offer to form a group earlier not because she disliked her, but because she prefers doing things her own way. No Yuna notices that the girl is shy and finds it cute. She says she doesn't know what the results will be, but asks to be Ri's friend if they meet again at the academy. Even though she's shy, Reincarnation accepts the offer, and the two of them toast with their soda cans. Outside, the whole family is exhausted from waiting for No Yuna to come out, and the protagonist wonders when she's going to show up. Some time later, the protagonist returns to school. His friend says that Im Do-hun is their class teacher again this year, and he finds it weird. The protagonist says that not only that, but the entire group of friends ended up in the same class, which is even weirder. Jin Seona also thinks about it and starts suspecting that the kid's grandpa might have something to do with it. She asks the protagonist what he thinks. No Yunha had figured it out right away, but he decides to keep that information to himself. Right after that, the teacher scolds the girl for talking and says she's really bold for not paying attention on the very first day. He gives her detention and tells Suona to clean the teacher's lounge after class. No Yunha doesn't get away either, since he was the one she was talking to. In Hyun laughs at the situation, but it backfires and he ends up being included in the punishment too. His friends get really mad at him and say the two of them are going to have a great time cleaning the teacher's lounge. Minji says that even as they grow up, none of them ever change because they always act like children. Meanwhile, at the secondary academy for players, No Yuni celebrates because she finally found Ryu Yanhwa. Both of them passed. Not only that, but they ended up in the same class. Suddenly, a commotion spreads through the place, and the girls have no idea what's happening. But someone announces that a celebrity has arrived, the Holy Mother, Park Hye-rin. Park Hye-rin smiles, but deep down, she doesn't like being called Holy Mother by kids that age. After all, she's only 22 and not that old. Anyway, she thinks it's been 4 years since she last saw that girl during the Kraken incident. Looking at No Yune, the saint says the girl is growing to the point where she can't even gauge how much mana she possesses. The saint also recognizes the older seed of the Namgong family and realizes her mana is so dense it's affecting her physical body. Getting straight to the point, the saint approaches No Yune and invites her to become her seed. She knows No Yune is powerful and many will want to take her as a disciple, so she must act quickly and be the first to approach her. But to her surprise, the girl ends up refusing. No Yuni says she already has a great teacher and doesn't intend to change. After being rejected so directly, Park Hye-rin is left speechless, as she didn't expect that. In any case, she receives a call from the guild leader Gui Yeonsu, who informs her about a monster horde subjugation. A missing persons case begins to circulate in the media. When the first one vanished, no one cared, but soon the numbers began to rise. Shortly after, many were found lifeless. However, it looked like they had been attacked by a ferocious beast. That's when everyone realized it was the work of a monster. Panic spread, and people began protesting against the goddess's government. To calm the fear, the goddess brought the kings, Regulus, and Blaze guilds to the city of Huashan. After that, in the Huashan Reserve, rank 6 monsters known as Sharp Tails prepared to attack. Because a player had gone there to hunt them, the leader of the Blaze Guild, Kang Hanchul, the same one who fought the Kraken on the bridge, strikes. And after incinerating the enemies, he asks how those monsters managed to stay hidden until now. Gu Yansu, the leader of the Regulus Guild, responds that the monsters are intelligent, and that their leader might have sensed the danger posed by humans and warned the horde to hide. He also warns the Flame Demon not to underestimate the monsters, as that could be dangerous. While they talk, Park Hyerin heals some of the wounded. She says most of the monsters have been defeated, but a few escaped, so they need to assemble a team to pursue them. Gu Yansu is surprised that one of the 12 monarchs lost a battle, but the leader of the King's Guild, Du Wanjun, says they did that on purpose, as the remaining monsters will lead them to their leader. Next, a King's Guild affiliate named Bang Yonji, also known as the Florist of the 12 Monarchs, appears. She says they found the leader of the monsters and points in the direction, but Kang is shocked by the news. He asks if the Sharp Tail leader is really in the reserve. His reaction is justified as he has an idea of what's coming. Watching how the florist uses her powers, Park Hyerin thinks that no matter how hard she tries, she'll never be able to manifest magic like that, because to Hyerin the florist has true talent, and she does not. Then Kang shows up and interrupts her thoughts. He tells her to stop drooling with envy and instead focus on the goal. She says she knows very well what her duty is, to be support. Du Yansu cuts into their conversation and says he has something important to show them. Then he reveals there's a tunnel beneath where they're standing, and the King's clan will inspect the entire area and eliminate any remaining threats. Meanwhile, the Blaze and Regulus guilds will form teams and take turns staying at the hideout. Gu Yansu tells Yanji to conserve her magic as long as possible, and she says she has enough mana for at most 4 hours. He then says he'll assign players to protect her during that time. However, Kang takes the lead, ignoring the entire plan, so the rest of the group rushes to catch up with him. When the group reaches the tunnel, everyone is horrified by what they discover inside. The missing people had been there the entire time, being devoured by the monsters, which leaves the warriors in shock as they witness it. Kang is the one who becomes most enraged. He uses his flames to attack and has no intention of ending things peacefully with the enemies. Not just him, everyone else attacks as well. After that, Gu Yansu tells a group to head to the wounded and gather all those who are still alive. But Kang doesn't stop attacking and ends up putting his teammates at risk. Not only that, Gu warns that the missing people are also in danger. Therefore, he needs to calm down and control his flames. After all, they're in a tight space. After those words, Kang manages to calm himself. Gu tells him to keep his head up, because as a leader, he must set an example for the others. Then Gu Yansu tells everyone not to stand still and to go help the injured. Worried, Park Hyerin asks if Kang is okay. He says he just got scolded because he made a mistake, but he's fine. He thinks that veteran players secretly look down on him. Gu did the same, calling him Demonic Flame instead of player Kang Hanchiol or Clan Lord of Blaze. That made him furious inside, because even though he made a mistake, he found such informal treatment disrespectful. However, Park Hyerin tries to comfort him, saying that compared to those with experience, they're just 2 rookies, so they should learn from the scolding instead of getting upset about it. Seeing his friend act that way, Kang calls her by her name, and Hyerin likes it. After all, he usually calls her by a nickname. Kang realizes what he did and says he wasn't being himself. He also thinks that one day he'll reach the same level of power as the others. Sometime later, the strongest warriors gather. Gu warns everyone that they found the monster boss, so they're going to form a team to kill the creature. He also says that he'll be leading, while the demonic flame will be the main damage dealer. For Park Hyerin, her role remains as support as always. Then they get into battle formation and enter the boss room. The group immediately comes face to face with the monster. Not only that, but the creature has laid eggs and is protecting them, which makes it even more dangerous. Even so, the group doesn't back down before the enemy. The creature does everything to protect its egg. Kang takes advantage of that and tries to strike up close. But piercing the monster's hide isn't as easy as it seems. At that moment, Gu comes in, attacking more intensely. He takes the lead in the assault, until he finally manages to pierce the monster. Since he created an opening, Kang uses it to channel his flames and burn the monster from the inside out. Gu complains that his sword was destroyed in the attack, but Kang says you can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs. Park Hyerin says the monster is still alive, and they shouldn't let their guard down. She casts a spell to restrain the monster and stop it from moving. At that moment, the long-range warriors begin to fire, but to their surprise, the monster has advanced regeneration, and it can even speak, cursing the humans for harming her and her babies. The surprises don't stop there, as some of the eggs begin to hatch. From them, hatchlings emerge and catch some warriors off guard. The mother monster uses the distraction to break free, and together with her young, she launches an attack. Gu tells the demonic flame to leave the little ones to him. Kang then heads toward the mother, but as he gets closer, the creature attacks with poison. As a result, Kang can't breathe properly, much less see. But from afar, Park Hyerin guides him in the right direction. He then dodges the creature's attack. Park Hyren tells him not to worry about the poison as she'll provide support, saying that Kang only needs to focus on attacking. She casts a divine spell that protects him from the toxin, allowing Kang to get close to the monster and strike it. When Kang got very close to the creature, he performed one of his special moves called Violent Blade. The monster became vulnerable once again, giving the long-range warriors a chance to fire again. The creature says her duty is to protect the king, but she can't withstand the attacks and collapses to the ground. Gu, however, says it's not over yet, because they need to destroy the eggs too. The creature is still alive and watches as her eggs are destroyed, but underneath her, there was one hidden egg. So the mother manages to protect it until the end, and calls it the king, wishing that her last child may be free. Shortly after escaping through the sewers, through the river waters, the creature reaches the city. 1 week after the mission against the sewer monster, news reports the player's victory and the return of survivors to their homes. Their conclusion is that no traces of monsters remain. In the present moment, the protagonist is with his friends in the camping area of Gwacheon City. Bruno is accompanying the group and is in charge of the food. No Yunha is only allowed to be there because his parents agree he would be safe near Bruno. That's why he thanks his friend for the help. The protagonist knows the idea to camp was his, but he says he needs to leave to take care of something. But first he asks to borrow a knife. Bruno says the knife he asked for is in the case and gives him the access code. Now armed, No Yunha says he'll be back today and asks Bruno to come up with an excuse for his absence. He tells Bruno to stay close to the other kids and protect them. He also says he's going alone, but there's no need to worry, because he's prepared. After that, No Yunha heads to a nearby greenhouse. He says that just like in his past life, he doesn't feel lost, because he knows he's facing the Lizard King. Right after, the monster emerges from its lair and attacks. However, the protagonist is more than ready and pushes it back. The invasion of Seoul, the event where commander-level monsters attack the city during the Saint's absence, was led by a massive army. At the time, No Yunha had just graduated from the Player Academy and didn't even hold any titles of authority. Even so, most players, including him, were disheartened after seeing the commanders leading the monster armies. Among the enemies was the Lizard King, who struck fear into the players due to his extremely potent poison weapon. He was also a very powerful level 3 monster, but now he's just a newborn. He had been hiding in that place, waiting for the right moment to act, but ended up being caught off guard by the protagonist. Still, even though he's not an adult, his armor is very strong, just like his mother's, and he's even capable of speaking, though not perfectly yet. No Yunha knows the monster can camouflage, and he needs to stay alert to that. The monster attacks, but he dodges, and says the creature definitely has malicious intent, but it still can't camouflage perfectly. Standing before the fallen monster, No Yunha throws a bottle of curry at it, claiming he prepared it especially for the lizard. No Yunha ironically states that this will be his enemy's final meal. In response, the lizard backs off and spits venom, but the protagonist had already anticipated this and dodges. Not only that, he rushes toward the monster and lands a precise hit, and in doing so, he defeats the monster. No Yunha had been expecting a stronger opponent, but the hatchling is still weak, and doesn't resemble the Lizard King he remembered. In any case, he believes it's over now. However, to his surprise, even while wounded, the monster returns. It used its last bit of strength to create a clone and escape. Since the lizard is intelligent, it knows it can't win against the boy. It's as if its opponent knows all its moves. So it wants to flee and grow stronger so it can face him again and take revenge. But the monster is caught off guard by the protagonist, who doesn't let it get away. No Yunha attacks the lizard and sends it flying. As he approaches, he says he already knew about that cloning ability. Enraged, the monster attacks the protagonist, hoping to bring him down once and for all. However, No Yunha shows no surprise. He attacks the monster with precision and uses his magical abilities, giving his enemy no chance. Cornered, the lizard asks why No Yunha is doing this. In turn, No Yunha says he doesn't need a reason to kill a monster. He believes monsters and humans can't coexist. There's simply not enough room in the world for both. The lizard begs for its life, saying it hasn't done anything wrong. Still, No Yunha states there's only one way this ends. One of them must die. After that, the lizard realizes that just like him, the boy is a predator. It admits defeat, but says it won't be the last. No Yunha thinks back to a time when he believed that the life of a player was to kill or be killed. But this time, he believes it will be different, because dying is not an option, especially not to weak monsters like this. After defeating the monster, it drops some skill stones. These stones contain the power of the defeated monster and are usually based on the monster's rarity. If someone absorbs the power of a stone, they can use the abilities it holds. However, they must have a compatible level, otherwise nothing will happen. But when compatibility is high, a bright light appears, and the monster's power becomes that of the player who holds the stone. After defeating the lizard, No Yunha returns to the camp. While putting away the weapons, Bruno approaches and asks if he finished what he needed to do. No Yunha says yes, thanks to his friend's help. Right after, he's impressed by the meal that was prepared and calls his friends to eat because he's starving too. The children then gather to eat, and they get excited to grab their barbecue. Seeing this, No Yunha smiles with joy. After all, this is what keeps him fighting. Sometime later, he and his family go to the city of Pyeongchang, to the residence of the president of the Sirius Group. His mother appears to be quite nervous, unlike the boys, who seem very calm. Soon after, the acting president Han Do-yeon and his wife Choi Subin arrive. They welcome branch manager No and his family. While the adults talk, another child appears. She is Han So-yeon, a freshman at secondary school and the eldest daughter of the hosts. No Yuna is the first to greet her, and they soon discover they're the same age. It doesn't take long for them to bond, as both share the dream of becoming players. Because of that, they even exchange contact info, and the protagonist praises his sister's social skills. Then he sees another girl approaching, but when he tries to talk to her, unlike her sister, this one is colder. Her name is Han Seo-hyun, the couple's second daughter, and she says she doesn't like being spoken to informally. Every year, the Sirius Group holds a year-end party where affiliates gather to celebrate their work, and 2 years ago, No Yuna and her family attended one of these events. His sister, as always, was much better at socializing than him. On that occasion, his father regretted that his mother couldn't attend, since she had to stay home to take care of little No Yuna. Regardless, Mr. No managed to socialize with his coworkers just fine. He had just been promoted from team leader to head of the device department, a major position in the company. Seeing him like that, No Yunha thought his father was very different at work than at home. But since the Sirius Group would prosper in the future, he had nothing to worry about. Amid those thoughts, he spotted a girl nearby, so he approached her and said she was missing out on a great opportunity. The girl didn't understand what he was talking about, but No Yunha said few kids had the chance to taste the food being served. To him, it's good to eat whenever you can, since they're still young and don't need to be as cautious as adults. No Yunha offered some food to the girl. She didn't know it was all you can eat, so she hadn't been interested. Still, she accepted the food the protagonist offered and found it very tasty. After that, No Yunha's father called him and said he was worried because he walked off without telling anyone. But behind his father, No Yunha saw someone he recognized, the acting president of Sirius, Han Do-yeon. That was the first time they met. No Yunha quickly began behaving politely and respectfully, introducing himself to Mr. Han. Han Do-yeon said he'd heard a lot about No Yunha and then introduced his eldest daughter to him. The protagonist thought he needed to make a good impression, since Han Do-yeon had been a brilliant executive in his past life. Then Mr. Han introduced his other daughter. He pointed to Han Seo-hyun. However, the protagonist remembered that in his previous life, Mr. Han only had one daughter, the eldest. Han Seo-hyun approached the protagonist and said she was 2 years older than him. No Yunha then suggested that he should speak to her formally, but she said that wasn't necessary. However, as soon as he greeted her more casually, the girl's demeanor completely changed, revealing herself to be cold and cautious. Mr. Han then asked them to get along and said he'd send an invitation for the No family to visit his home in the future. Back in the present, the protagonist thinks that Mr. Han really did send that invitation. Han Do-yeon remembers that No Yuna recently entered the Player Academy and that he should have given her something before, but now is the perfect time. He says that as a player, she should have something so she can be contacted anytime, anywhere, so he gives her a new cell phone. Her father thanks him for the gift, but says it might be too much. However, Han Do-yeon says it's his duty to treat his colleague and his family well, especially since he might need him in the future. No Yunha says she already has a phone, but Mr. Han says this one is better, since it was manufactured by the Sirius Group. Still, to the protagonist, something feels off, because the Han family not only invited them to their home, but also gave them gifts, and he wonders why. On the other side of the room, the two older girls are planning a get-together for the kids, and Han So-yeon says it can be at her house. Not only that, but she says her new friend's brother is also invited. She mentions that her sister usually doesn't have friends, so it would be nice if No Yunha were there. After all, they've met before. The girl doesn't like her sister saying she has no friends. However, So-yeon says she can't count the kids who follow her around as friends. Anyway, she says it would be good for her to be friends with No Yunha, which makes the protagonist realize the real purpose of this gathering. He thinks that when children of important people get together early on, it's usually to form bonds and help each other in adulthood. In other words, So-yeon, as the eldest daughter, is trying to connect her sister to him. The protagonist would normally reject this idea, but the girl's own parents are encouraging it. He feels cornered and thinks the heir of the Sirius Group will follow in the footsteps of Han Do-yeon. Looking at So-yeon, he imagines the girl is pretending to be unaware, but in truth, she's skillfully controlling the conversation. Thus, he concludes that for the sake of his father and sister, he cannot reject the company of the youngest Han, so he agrees to attend the event, which makes the adults quite happy. Later in the city center, a drunk man is wandering aimlessly until he notices something strange happening. Soon, a giant mosquito appears behind him and attacks, sucking his blood. The drunk is quickly drained and collapses to the ground. Chased by a group of players, the mosquito flees. One member of the group tries to help the man on the ground, but the leader says the man collapsed because of alcohol. Even so, the player wants to follow protocol and take the man to a hospital. However, without anyone noticing, the unconscious man automatically heals himself. Some time later, a heat wave is announced, and the kids begin their summer vacation. Julieta is at the maternity ward because she just gave birth, so the whole group goes to visit her. She's happy to see them, but asks them to stay quiet so they don't wake the baby. The girls are enchanted by the baby and think he's adorable. The protagonist, on the other hand, notices that the little one stays calm even around strangers, and Julieta says he gets that from her. She also says he's a healthy boy, and mentions that the protagonist's mother and younger sister visited earlier. That's when she revealed the baby's name for the first time, saying the boy will be called Avenir. Immediately, the protagonist remembers that before returning, he read the raid log of the Abyss dungeon, and one of the names written was exactly Avenir Myron. His nickname was Diamond Fists because he played an important role in the raid thanks to his strong punches. For the protagonist, there's no doubt, they're the same person. In fact, in his past life, the reason Julieta didn't disconnect from the server called Life was precisely because of her son. And now the protagonist realizes that even under different circumstances, the story is repeating itself. Julieta says her son is a younger brother to No Yunha, and asks him to treat the boy that way, to take good care of him. She also says her wish is for her son to grow up as quickly as possible so he can help him. Moreover, she mentions that just like the parents, little Avenir has the surname No, much to the protagonist's despair. After the visit, the children decide to return to No Yunha's house. But outside the hospital, it's really hot. John Haang says there's a pool at the community center, and they can go there anytime. Meanwhile, the protagonist's thoughts are elsewhere. He says it's a Wednesday. Nearby, he sees a group of drifters, orphans who lost their families due to monsters. They're helpless children receiving community aid. The goddess's government built facilities for orphans and provided free food and other services every Wednesday. However, this still isn't enough to change the miserable situation the orphans are in. Observing all of this, No Yunha sees that a boy is about to be crushed by a pile of boxes and hasn't even noticed, so he quickly rushes over to the boy and manages to stop him from getting hit. After being saved, the boy calls No Yunha an angel. He says his mother always told him that when he was in danger, an angel would appear to save him. The other orphans see the boy near the protagonist and walk over to him. One of the older boys pulls the kid close, telling him not to talk to strangers. They apologize to the protagonist out of fear of being punished, and say it will never happen again. Seeing this, not only No Yunha, but all his friends feel sorry for the orphans. No Yunha thinks that this kind of fear affects everyone in some way, since it's natural for some parents not to mention wanderers at all, and children who only know schools and parks have no idea of the reality in the slums, let alone ever go to those places. His friends, in fact, don't really understand this situation, but No Yunha pushes them away, because he believes his friends don't need to face that harsh reality just yet. He knows the dark side of the world is cruel. That's why he doesn't want to expose his friends to it. The next day, the group takes a break in the shade to cool off. They're waiting for everyone to arrive before going to the pool. But soon, the drunk man from earlier comes running nearby. The man received news from a doctor that he has a concentration disorder, but he doesn't believe it, because he doesn't have a normal amount of mana. And after dreaming about a mosquito sucking his blood, he started feeling weaker. He thinks it's just a dream since there are no wounds on his body. However, his mind was damaged after being attacked by the monster, and he doesn't even realize it. The children spot the man and wonder if he's okay, but far from it. The guy is in such bad shape that he's hallucinating. He decides it's best to call work and say he's not coming in because he feels sick. But when he looks at his phone screen, he sees the mosquito that attacked him. Nervous, he even drops the phone, and the kids get closer to help. But he tells them to stay away, and Han insists on helping. However, right after that, the man starts to transform and says he can't be helped. Just a few seconds later, he turns into a mosquito, just like the one that attacked him, posing a serious threat to the children. Nearby, the protagonist and Minji are dying from the heat. He suggests buying ice cream, but Minji says they're late because of him, otherwise, they'd already be at the pool with the others. The protagonist then suggests carrying her to the meeting spot to get there faster. However, they hear something and get startled. Shounen manages to speak to them from a distance and calls for help, saying there's a monster nearby. No Yunha tells his friend to call the management center, and in the meantime, he gets ready to run to the others. And right after that, he takes off at superhuman speed. Minji, for her part, says he ran off without even asking where the monster was. The power that with just a fraction can make a heart beat. Every living being has mana inside them. However, the amount of mana a body can handle differs from person to person. If someone accumulates more mana than their body can contain, they can surpass human limits. and that is called a monster. Back with the kids, Yoon Hyunk and his friends are running because they just saw someone turn into a monster. The mosquito is chasing them. Yoon Hyunk realizes that, at this pace, the monster will catch up very quickly, but he doesn't want to fight, thinking he can hold out until his captain shows up to help. Yoon Hyunk knows the protagonist entrusted him with the group's protection, so he suggests that Seona run while carrying Haeyang since she's falling behind. Seona picks up her friend and decides to trust Yoon Hyunk, concluding that he must have a plan in mind. After that, he asks Haeyang to create a barrier to keep the monster away. The girl acts just as instructed, so when she sees the monster getting close, she creates a magical barrier to push it back. Meanwhile, Seona says she's going to send a message to anyone nearby using her telepathy. While Haeyang maintains the barrier around them, Seona sends out the distress call. Yoon Hyunk doesn't stand still and takes the opportunity to try to strike the monster. Haeyang manages to create a small opening, and through it he lands a hit on the giant insect. After that, they start running again, but it only served to slow the monster down. Now, not only is it chasing them again, but it's even angrier. While being carried, Haeyang analyzes the creature, trying to understand how a person could transform into something like that. But when she looks inside the giant insect, she wonders, why is there monster mana mixed with human mana? Amid that distraction, the mosquito gets dangerously close, nearly striking her. Afraid, Haeyang has a mana reaction and pushes both the insect and her friend away. Seona is thrown far and Yoon Hyunk doesn't know which of the two to help. Worried, Haeyang approaches her friend and apologizes for what happened. Seona's legs end up injured, but she says it's fine. Besides, they have bigger problems to deal with. Yoon Hyunk realizes it's impossible to carry Seona and escape at the same time, so his only option is to stay, and he prepares to fight, telling Haeyang to do the same. The two start attacking from a distance and try to keep the monster away. However, it doesn't help much, as the giant mosquito only becomes more enraged. It tries to charge, but Haeyang repels it as much as possible. Seona realizes she can't stay still while her friends are fighting. She sees that Haeyang feels guilty for hurting her and is now overexerting herself to protect everyone. Believing they're all going to be eaten, Seona tells her friends to run and leave her as bait, but Yoon Hyunk calms her down, saying that it's exactly at times like these that the captain shows up. And speaking of him, the protagonist arrives, delivering a flying kick to the monster. His friends are happy to see him, but they complain about his delay. No Yoonha says they're complaining for nothing and insists that, in the end, he always shows up right on time. He tells his friends to step back and wait for the arrival of the other players. His friends reveal that someone suddenly transformed into that monster. No Yoonha then realizes that these mosquitoes steal mana instead of devouring humans. The ability to control mana becomes unstable once it's stolen, and to recover it, the body keeps accumulating mana until it can't handle it anymore. In the end, the person either explodes or transforms into a monster. The protagonist thinks that if someone infected by this thing was wandering around, the hospital or the players need to improve their procedures. But right now, he can't think about that, because now he needs to take care of the monster before it attacks more people. With a punch, the protagonist manages to knock the creature down. However, he notices that it's still conscious. The creature begins to transform again. The protagonist tells his friends to stay back, because he notices that the human who turned into the mosquito is still in there, but is going through a process of demonization. Before returning, there was a demonic organization that caused major problems in Korea called Kuma, and they referred to their disasters as neotropics. The chances of someone becoming a demon are so rare they're practically non-existent, so he asks if the person wasn't a woman. But his friends say no and confirm that before transforming, the person was a man. He asked that because one of the Kuma members was a well-known woman, and besides, there are still 10 years before that organization is supposed to appear. With that, he believes that whatever is behind this monster might be something else. But in the middle of those thoughts, the mosquito tries to flee. The protagonist attempts to strike, but realizes he's low on mana, so he chases after it and realizes he needs a weapon. Soon after, the monster corners a woman and her daughter in an alley, but instead of attacking them, it asks the woman if she's forgotten him. At that moment, the protagonist appears and lands a hit on the monster. Again, the mosquito flies away. Before chasing after it, No Yoonha tells the woman to make sure she goes to a hospital and gets a mana test. After that, he goes after the mosquito and manages to strike it midair, forcing the monster to crash to the ground. No Yoonha notices the mosquito entered some kind of abandoned warehouse, but as he enters, he's startled to realize the place is used for food storage. He sees he arrived too late. If those people had their mana stolen, most will meet the same fate as the man who became the mosquito. However, before the worst can happen, he needs to kill the mosquito. No Yoonha attacks the monster again. Seeing how its appearance has changed, he realizes the demonization wasn't completed, and it probably lost all memory of its human self. When attacked, the mosquito escapes into the air once more. But before No Yoonha can pursue it, he hears someone calling him an angel. Because of this distraction, he doesn't see the ceiling collapsing and ends up trapped inside. Through the opening in the roof, No Yoonha sees some players are already chasing the monster. He can leave the rest to them, as he now needs to take care of something else. No Yoonha approaches a boy and realizes it's the same one he helped before. However, the boy's condition is far from good. Such a situation makes the protagonist remember something from his past. Once he was in Suwon with his group, Mist Flower. They were facing Beelzebub, the member of the Kuma, whom he feared greatly. While No Yoonha was being healed, his ally charged into the fight, but he was careless and ended up facing the enemy alone. His teammates tried to run after him, as their group had only one support. The enemy knew that, and right after, she went after the group's Reaper. However, the protagonist stopped her from touching his ally. Even though she was seriously injured, the leader of the mosquitoes showed no negative reaction. She said she was finally standing before the so-called undead. She also said she knew the woman behind him, but claimed that the protagonist's power didn't match the 12 monarchs. Immediately, she resumed her attacks, using her mosquitoes, but the insects were destroyed midair by fire. Because the woman behind No Yoonha was the Arrow Witch, the enemy said that even with that name, the witch was still weak, despite her vast mana reserves. However, she admitted the witch was the first not to turn into a monster after being attacked by her insects, and should be proud. After that, the group's support tried to attack the enemy again. The enemy said he returned quickly, assuming that must have been the Reaper's doing. While they were fighting for their lives, the witch was healed by the Reaper, but she surprised her leader by asking to leave, and wished that he would do it. No Yoonha refused, so she asked if her leader had gotten that attached to her. As Lee Yu-jong cried, unable to help her friend, the protagonist approached the witch and said he had, in fact, grown attached to her. And before delivering the final blow, he told her they would meet again in hell, and with that, he granted her final wish. Back in the present, No Yoonha comes across the boy who calls him an angel. The boy says all the other wanderers have passed away, and he knows his end is near too. Then the boy asks why the angel never smiles. No Yoonha thinks that his horrible past has made him cold, and replies that he forgot how to smile a long time ago. However, the boy says he should smile, because he believes that someday, the angel will find a reason to do so. No Yoonha approaches the boy and says this will hurt a bit, and asks what his final words are. Simply, the boy says he misses his mother. Amid all that, the protagonist thinks that in his past he hated children. They cried and believed their parents would fix their problems, and they were selfish and shallow. For No Yoonha, the innocent smile of a child hugging their parents didn't exist in hell, because children believed they could at least be happy. But the things No Yoonha lost in his past life, when he saw his family die before his eyes, made him lose the innocence of a normal child. Back in the present, he picks up the boy's teddy bear and says he smiles so that the people around him don't worry. However, the emotional exhaustion from the battlefield didn't go away, even after he returned. That's why he can't shed a single tear for the boy, nor for those who have already passed. He gives the toy back to the boy and says that instead he prefers to give him a dignified end and do the opposite to all monsters. Sometime later, it is reported that thanks to the exemplary efforts of a girl, the mosquito that terrorized the city was safely subdued, and the girl receives a bravery award from the mayor of Sungbuk. While No Yoonha watches TV, his little sister approaches. She thinks her brother hasn't smiled recently and doesn't like when he's sad. Then the girl remembers that their mom asked her to cheer him up whenever he looked down. So No Yoonha runs up to her brother and hugs him. Seeing the girl so enthusiastic, the protagonist asks why. No Yoonha says she's happy. She also takes the chance to kiss him on the cheek and says she really likes her brother. The protagonist then smiles at her and says he really likes No Yoonha too. Sometime later, it's once again time for the elementary school festival. The race is about to begin, and the protagonist still hasn't found his partner, until he looks at Siona and calls out to her. He grabs his friend's arm and runs. After that, he hands in his paper to the event coordinator. The man looks at the paper and sees that it says dog, so he asks if Siona is one. Annoyed, the girl says she's not a dog, but a fox. However, she remembers that her team needs to win, and besides, she wants to help Minji become the next class president. With that, she agrees to pretend to be a dog, but she gets really angry at the protagonist for putting her in this situation. After the race, they stop for lunch, and No Yoonha gives her brother her lunchbox. She says she prepared it with No Yoonha's help and even drew his face on the rice. Her friends get jealous and say he should at least treat them with half the affection he gives to Yoonha. The protagonist says there's no reason to do that, and besides, he was forced to join the race. Minji says that as class president, she had to put him in the race because they need the highest score. No Yoonha argues that she's only doing it because the teacher promised snacks for everyone. While they argue, Haeyang arrives with her family. This time, her father isn't alone. He has found a stepmother for the girl named Min Sujin. A few months ago, her father got married again. Min Sujin is the second daughter of Grandpa Min Junsik from the Alice group. At the wedding, the kids found out who the grandpa that used to play with them really was and were shocked for a moment. Even so, they both kept a good relationship. Besides, Haeyang feels uncomfortable calling Min Sujin mom, but she's trying her best. Walking a bit, the protagonist thinks he's going to sleep a lot when he gets home. However, he sees Seola in an alley. Calling her puppy, he asks what she's doing there. Seola doesn't like being called that and says that because of him, everyone is calling her that now. Anyway, he wants to understand what she's doing there. But then he ends up overhearing a conversation. Minji is arguing with her mother, saying she doesn't want to explain who she goes out with. Her mother says she can stay close to Yunha and Yeonhyuk, but it would be better if she got even closer to Haeyang. She also says that, in addition, she would like Minji to distance herself from Siona. Minji doesn't understand why her mother is criticizing her friends. In turn, her mother claims that Siona is a demi-human, and because of that, people don't look kindly on demi-humans, and the same applies to those who get close to them. So she doesn't want her daughter near Siona. Hearing that, the protagonist understands why Siona was upset. The girl says she understands and states that someone like her can't have friends. Seola simply says she's grateful for how she's been treated and is sorry for embarrassing Minji in front of her mother. But now she wants to leave. Minji's mother continues scolding her daughter, claiming that all the other mothers are giving the same advice to their children. Besides, if she keeps playing with Siona, she'll grow more distant from the other kids. Minji, however, says she doesn't care about that, and declares that Siona is her true friend. Her mother says that's fine, but Minji won't have the right to regret it later for not listening to her elders. The protagonist notices that the two have finished their conversation, so he decides to leave before being caught, calling Siona to come with him. The girl was moved by being defended by her friend, and that made her day much brighter. After that, they return to the competition, and the blue team is doing very well. Minji notices something strange about the protagonist, and asks why he's trying so hard. He simply replies that he works hard when he wants to. On the other side, Siona wins the class relay. Meanwhile, in Limbo, Yeonhyuk secures another victory for his team. Even Haeyang managed a win in the three-legged race. At the end of the day, the blue team scores the highest, much to Minji's delight. She takes the chance to start her campaign for class president right then and there, but she notices her classmates acting strangely. All of them grab Minji at the same time and lift her high into the air, tossing her in celebration for the victory. With that, her mother can see that her daughter is truly loved by her friends, because she sees on the girl's face the happiness of someone being embraced by genuine friendships.
Our video ends here. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye bye.